Chapter 16:12. Since someone invited him, Shoho naturally wouldn't be polite. He called the members of Squad 3 and 4 and strode towards the East City Gate. While walking, they also intentionally tidied up the long backpack behind them. It contained the 95 style. Completely caught off guard, Shoho brought his men to the side of the Chili Arch. The other members also began to move closer to the other soldiers of the Southern Ming Army. A silent killing intent was spreading. The Chili Arch seemed to be a chatterbox, but he also seemed to have a friendly personality. When he saw Skinny Monkey standing in front of him, he walked up with a smile. Then he noticed the long cloth bag and asked curiously, "Lord Bodyguard, may I know what this is?" "What? Do you want to know?" Shoho didn't have any intention to refuse. He smiled and took the long cloth from his back and placed it in front of the Chili Arch. "Can I see it?" "In that case, I'd like to broaden my horizons." The Chili Arch chuckled with an intrigued look on his face. It seemed that everyone was very curious about the unknown. At this moment, not only the Chili Arch, but the other Southern Ming soldiers also came to the side of the Langya Special Forces members with curious looks. Even the Southern Ming soldiers who were responsible for guarding the civilians also gathered. "Oh, I see. Then I'll show it to you. This is the secret weapon prepared by Lord Baikuan." Skinny Monkey-like laughed, then gave a look to the other Special Forces members. Then the long cloth strip was slowly opened, and the black gun body appeared in front of the Southern Ming soldiers. Most of these Southern Ming soldiers were people who rebelled with the three provinces King Zhuhuetu. But after Baikuan surrendered to the Southern Ming army, they also changed and became part of the Southern Ming army. For people like them, their military quality was very ordinary, not to mention their knowledge. For people like them, firearms were something they had only heard of and had never seen with their own eyes. Not to mention the extremely advanced 95 style. When this thing was taken out, they only knew that it was an iron lump. As for what it was used for, they had no idea at all. Shoho and the other members took out the 95 style in front of the enemy, then held it in their hands and pulled the safety. "How is it? Have you never seen him before? Let me tell you, this is the newest firearm. Its name is the 95 style. How about this? There's no point in just talking about it. I'll show you all their might so that everyone will have more confidence when it comes to defending the city." Yes. Let us take a look and we will be more confident." The Southern Ming soldiers nodded in agreement. They didn't know that at this time, they had already taken a step into the gates of hell. Skinny Monkey and the others didn't expect things to go so smoothly. Each of the team members quickly communicated with each other with their eyes. Skinny Monkey even straightforwardly made a hand gesture. This was not only for the 59 team members beside him to see, but also for Captain Tai Tiger, who was a mile away. He was sending the signal to attack. Fire. Everything was ready. The Chili Arch was still standing together with the soldiers, waiting to watch the show. Suddenly they realized that the black muzzles were pointed at them. Before they could react and understand what was going on, gunshots rang out. Bullets flew out from the muzzles as if they had eyes and hit their bodies. In exchange, the Southern Ming soldiers fell to the ground one after another. Their bodies were strangely identical, with bullet holes that were bleeding. At such a close distance, and when the enemy wasn't prepared, the 1,000 Southern Ming soldiers didn't even have time to react before they fell to the ground one by one. The originally bustling East City Tower instantly became much more spacious. Charge. Tai Tiger was overjoyed when he saw all of this. Skinny Monkey and the others had successfully completed their mission and occupied the East City Gate. Now it was time for him to launch his attack. He stood up and gave the order to the other members of the Special Forces to charge. At the same time, he raised his hand and shot a red signal flare into the sky, signaling to the 5-star Army cavalry outside the city to attack. The first to be frightened by the sudden change on the city tower were the commoners who were driven into the city. Just a moment ago, they saw the Southern Ming soldiers surrounding Skinny Monkey and the others. But in just a short while, all of them fell to the ground and became corpses? What kind of powerful weapons were these people holding? Also, if these people wanted to attack them with guns, what should they do? Wait for death? Even at this time, the commoners were still cowering and huddling together. No one thought of resisting with their lives. It had to be said that this was also a kind of tragedy. Someone once said that when the Japanese invaded China, 2 Japanese soldiers were enough to watch over 2,000 people and make them not dare to act rashly. That was a scene that people didn't dare to imagine. But this was the most realistic portrayal of what happened to the commoners. This was the behavior of the foolish commoners. The way they were educated made them listen to everything that happened. Without anyone leading them, even if they knew that they would die, they would still accept it. They didn't even have the thought of resisting. It really made people angry and sad. However, this kind of thing wouldn't happen in the future. After becoming a Yangxia citizen, they would be educated and learn how to read and learn. At that time, they would know that people's lives were equal. If others wanted to kill them, they would kill them back. This was a legitimate defense and also a result of human nature. In this way, if someone wanted to harm the Han people in the future, they would have to wait for the countless Han people to stand up and resist them. At that time, even if you were a devil, the commoners would work together to tear you to pieces and defeat you. Back in the real world, Tai Hu and the others started to charge. After the southern Ming soldiers on the city tower noticed that something was wrong, they started to send troops to attack the city gate. Instantly, gunshots rang out and the soldiers of the South Ming dynasty fell into a pool of blood. When Tai Hu and the others started to charge, Skinny Monkey also came in front of the commoners and said loudly to them, "We are the 5-star army. We are here to save you. In order to survive, please help us open the city gate and welcome the 5-star army into the city. Don't worry, at that time no one will be able to threaten your lives. As long as your actions are reasonable and legal, you will be the proud Han people in the future. No one will dare to bully you anymore. I can guarantee that." Hearing Skinny Monkey say that he was sent by the 5-star army to save them, there was no need for any guarantees. The commoners all became excited. In the past, there were some rumors about the 5-star army, saying that they were very good to the Han people. If there were people who didn't believe it when they were defending the city, the 5-star army didn't use cannons to blast open the city gate and injure them. Therefore, at this moment, there was no need for Skinny Monkey to guarantee anything. All of the commoners chose to believe him. What are you waiting for? Open the city gate and let the 5-star army in. Among the commoners, someone finally reacted and shouted. The commoners were like this. Once someone took the lead, they could display unimaginable strength. With everyone working together, the thick city gate was pushed open. At this moment, smoke and dust could be seen rising from the east gate. That was the scene of the 5-star army's cavalry from the north and south of the city. Very good, you have used your actions to save your own lives. You have done very well. However, there are still many commoners like you who are being used at the other 3 city gates. If you are willing, you can come with us to save more commoners. As the saying goes, saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. Your chance to accumulate good karma has come. Of course, if you don't want to go, no one will force you. As long as you stay here, your safety will be guaranteed. Skinny Monkey was still using his words to encourage the commoners. This was because this step was the first step for them to change. Under Skinny Monkey's persuasion, and with the thought that saving people could accumulate good karma, the main reason was that many of the commoners' relatives were still at the other city gates and they indeed needed their help. Therefore, this suggestion quickly gained the support of most of the commoners. At this moment, more and more commoners responded, and Skinny Monkey's team continued to expand. Good, then everyone get ready. When the main cavalry of the 5-star army enters the city, we will go to the other city gates. At that time, how many commoners we can save will depend on you. Skinny Monkey was very satisfied with the commoners' performance and immediately grinned. In front of the city gate, Tai Hu led 7 small teams to snipe the South Ming army coming down from the top of the city gate. Those who were able to join the Wolf Fang Special Forces and pass the assessment were all very skilled. As for the marksmanship, it was the focus of their training. Not all of them were sharpshooters, but they were not far from it. When they unleashed their godly spear techniques, none of the southern Ming soldiers who rushed down the city walls were able to escape. They were all shot to death. Thousands of people rushed down continuously, but none of them could reach the city gate. The general guarding the east city was finally afraid. He no longer sent people to attack the city gate. Instead, he lit up a thick smoke and began to warn them. At this moment, countless cavalry soldiers of the First Army entered the city through the east city gate. At this point, the scales of victory began to tilt. Bai Kuan was still watching the performance of the 5-star army on the West City Gate Tower. When he saw the cavalry of the 5-star army constantly moving and the ground rumbling, he had already changed from the initial fear to the current calm. Chapter 16:13. In his opinion, this was simply the 5-star army's bluff. If they really had such strength, they would have charged into the city a long time ago instead of lingering here from morning to noon. It was as if they had nothing to do. Lord, thick smoke, thick smoke. A guard casually looked back out of boredom and saw the thick smoke rising from the east gate. Then he exclaimed out loud. What thick smoke? Seeing how unsettled his guard was, Bai Kuan showed a disdainful expression. He was already thinking of kicking this person out of the guard team. After all, if he wanted to follow his own people, he needed to be calm because he was a hero of the southern Ming dynasty. As he spoke, Bai Kuan also turned around and saw the thick smoke rising from the east gate. At this moment he completely forgot what it meant to be calm. He just stood there with his mouth wide open. He didn't know what to do. Wasn't there no 5-star army outside the east gate? Why is there smoke rising all of a sudden? What is going on? Could it be that someone had mistakenly lit the smoke signal? As soon as this idea came out, it was directly rejected by Bai Kuan. Even if there was a mistake, it should have been extinguished immediately instead of letting the smoke get bigger and bigger. In this case there could only be one result. The east gate was in danger and it might have been breached by the 5-star army. What's going on? Where did the main force of the 5-star army come from outside the east gate? How did they attack the city? Why didn't we hear the sound of cannons? As soon as he opened his mouth, he asked a series of questions. But regarding all this, no one knew what was going on, so naturally no one could answer Bai Kuan's question. Report. Fortunately, it didn't take long before a scout from the city rushed to Bai Kuan's feet. What the hell happened? Tell me. Bai Kuan grabbed the scout's collar and asked with red eyes. Reporting to the general. That scout was also shocked by Bai Kuan's words. However, he still replied instinctively. The 5-star army suddenly appeared in the city and attacked from the inside. Now that the main force of the 5-star army has entered the city, all the city gates have become dangerous. General, please send reinforcements. When the scout's reply entered Bai Kuan's ears, he shook his head in disbelief. Impossible. How could there be 5-star army reinforcements in the city? Didn't we check it before? Where did they come from? Bai Kuan found it hard to believe the truth in front of him. If someone were to tell him right now that the 5-star army's reinforcements had flown over while his attention was focused on the cavalry below the city walls, he would definitely not believe it. But now, regardless of whether he believed it or not, things had already happened. What he needed to do now was to send reinforcements. But the problem was, if he were to face the 5-star army head-on, would his 30,000 South Ming soldiers really be a match? If he was an opponent, why would he threaten the commoners to become human shields? Although he knew that the possibility of them being a match wasn't high. But at this moment he had no other choice. Bai Kuan waved his hand and said with the attitude of a general who wouldn't return, "Leave a portion of you to guard the west side of the city. The rest of you follow me down the city walls. We will work together to chase the 5-star army out of the city." Chasing them out was a lie. The real thing was to find a chance to escape. Because when Bai Kuan said this, he didn't have the confidence to do it. The soldiers below didn't know the truth. They only saw that even the general was going to get on the horse and they were all encouraged. Thinking that the city was still their territory, they all shouted and followed Bai Kuan down the city walls. The 5-star army's cavalry entered the city. Leading them was a division commander, Taimu. He had quite a bit of experience and most importantly, his horse riding skills weren't bad. After entering the city, he led the cavalry and started to rampage. Whenever they met the South Ming reinforcements, the cavalry would crush the South Ming infantrymen in an instant. After the cavalry charged past, the ground was covered with corpses. The soldiers he brought were all veterans and elites. Furthermore, they were cavalry and had a natural ability to crush infantrymen. There really wasn't anyone who was a match for him. Wherever the cavalry went, the South Ming soldiers would either run away or kneel on the ground and surrender. The world's #1 cavalry was simply too strong. They were so strong that no one was a match for them after entering the city. Under Taimur's leadership, they first attacked the North City Gate and defeated the South Ming soldiers there. They opened the city gate from the inside and allowed the soldiers of the 2nd Division to enter the city. Following this, the 2nd Division headed straight for the South City Gate while Taimur led his troops to the West City Gate. As the saying goes, enemies are bound to meet. Before they charged far, they saw a group of South Ming soldiers coming from the West City Gate. The general leading them was General Bai Kuan, who had just been appointed as Guangxi's left envoy. From afar Bai Kuan also saw Taimur. However, he didn't recognize him. Seeing that he was wearing a general's armor, he only thought that he was an ordinary general. Bai Kuan, who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to kill his way out, naturally wouldn't avoid anyone. He needed to kill his way out. TSK, come and die. Facing the 5-star army that didn't have any firearms, Bai Kuan was still confident. After all, he was personally appointed as the Guangxi Great General by Zhu Huitu. You are Bai Kuan? On the other hand, Taimur recognized the general immediately. This was also because before the battle, someone had drawn a portrait of Bai Kuan. It was precisely because he had seen it that he recognized Bai Kuan. He was a little surprised. He was surprised that Bai Kuan recognized him. However, at this moment he definitely wouldn't back down because of this reason. On the contrary, he waved his spear and charged forward. Who cared how this person recognized him? He would kill him first. Haha, good timing. Taimur wasn't disappointed that Bai Kuan didn't respond. He only needed to know that Bai Kuan's identity was very important. Holding his scimitar, Taimur began to speed up. It was precisely because he knew Bai Kuan's identity that Taimur didn't dare to be careless. Before he attacked, he had already made sufficient preparations. His other scimitar was ready to be unsheathed at any time. On the other hand, Bai Kuan's fighting strength was weaker than Taimur's to begin with. In addition, he had underestimated his opponent. He didn't think that his luck would be so bad that he would randomly encounter a famous general in the 5-star army. Therefore, when he attacked, he held back 30% of his strength so that he could charge forward later. After all, he didn't know how difficult the road ahead would be. If he used up all his strength right away, what would he do in the future? Just like that, one held back 30% of his strength while the other used all his strength. Originally, the strength of both sides wasn't equal. The strong were stronger and the weak were weaker. After just one exchange of blows, Bai Kuan knew that he had made a big mistake. The spear and scimitar collided. In that instant, a huge force was transmitted through his arm. It also caused Bai Kuan's entire body to tremble. His right hand that was holding the weapon almost lost its strength and threw it away. When an expert showed his hand, it was obvious whether he was skilled or not. After knowing Taimur's strength, Bai Kuan decided to use all his strength to deal with him. At the same time, he secretly cursed his bad luck. How could he meet such a fierce general so casually? However, it was obviously a little too late for Bai Kuan to get serious. Taimur, who had gained the upper hand in one move, laughed heartily and waved his left hand. The scimitar quickly drew a gust of wind and slashed across Bai Kuan's armor. With one slash, the armor was split into two. At the same time, blood and flesh were drawn out. It was just one slash. If it wasn't for the armor protecting his body, Bai Kuan's body would have been split into two. Ayaya. Bai Kuan involuntarily cried out when he felt the intense pain in his chest. He then turned around and tried to leave. Beside him, a few of his personal guards rushed over on their horses in an attempt to save their master. The bodyguards weren't slow. However, compared to the soldiers of the world's #1 cavalry army, they were much slower. These soldiers seemed to have expected something would happen. Without waiting for the bodyguards to rush over, they rushed out and blocked the path of the bodyguards. Taking this opportunity, Taimur chased after Bai Kuan. Just as Bai Kuan turned his horse around, a slash of his scimitar came towards him. Bai Kuan didn't expect that he would be hit again. His arm was hit once more and he fell from his horse as a result. Save the general. When the bodyguards who didn't have horses saw this scene, they quickly rushed forward and blocked Taimur with their lives. Then, under the protection of the bodyguards, Bai Kuan, who was covered in blood, led the infantrymen behind him and kept retreating. Take the small path. Although Bai Kuan had been slashed twice, he was still conscious. After that exchange, he saw the power of the 5-star army's cavalry. He knew that it wasn't realistic to escape by the main road. The only way was to rely on everyone's familiarity with the terrain of Nanning Prefecture and take the small paths to shake off their pursuers. The South Ming army was retreating while blocking the enemy. Along the way they left behind more and more corpses. Hence, Bai Kuan was getting further and further away from Taimur. He was now 70 steps away. Let's stay. Seeing the fat meat in his hands trying to slip away, how could Taimur agree? If he really let the target escape, who knew how the other division commanders would laugh at him when he returned? He took out the Big Dipper crossbow from his back and pulled the bowstring. The Big Dipper crossbow was the exclusive weapon of the world's #1 army. Because the materials used to make it were expensive, it wasn't easy to make. Hence, the only army that could use it was the world's #1 army. When the Big Dipper crossbow was taken out, the so-called South Ming army became a target that couldn't withstand a single blow. Faced with the crossbow that could fire 7 arrows at a time, and the speed at which the arrows were loaded and loaded was extremely fast, a large number of South Ming soldiers fell in just 2 waves of attacks. Chapter 16-14. Some of them had already become corpses, while others had knelt down and surrendered out of fear. This caused Taimur to have no obstacles in his way. With a loud laugh, Commander Taimur leapt out on his horse and headed straight for the injured Bai Kuan. The 5-star army's cavalry entered the city, which meant that Nanning Prefecture had fallen. When the 4 city gates opened from the inside, countless commoners erupted with their strength, knocking down the 20,000 southern Ming soldiers. The strength of the commoners could not be underestimated. It was fine if they didn't erupt, but once they did, the shocking strength they released would leave people speechless. Thus, Nanning Prefecture fell. The pitiful Baikuan was first captured alive by Taimur due to his injuries. After a simple bandage, he was tied to a pillar in front of the city square. Countless commoners swarmed over. The timid ones were allowed to throw rotten eggs or green vegetables at Baikuan's body. The more daring ones directly spat at him. There were even some who urinated on him on the streets. As for the more daring ones, they used sharp daggers to slice off Baikuan's flesh under the supervision of the 5-star army soldiers. This was a punishment worse than death by 1,000 cuts. All of this was because Baikuan wanted to force the commoners into a state of certain death. Now retribution had arrived. If he had known that this would happen, he would not have chosen to use the commoners as a human shield even if he was beaten to death. Afterwards, when Baikuan's matter was intentionally spread to the various prefectures of southern Ming, all of the generals fell silent. They originally thought that the 5-star army slogan of loving the commoners was a weakness that could be used against him. If they did it well, they might be able to turn defeat into victory. But now Baikuan had done this. Not only had he died without a burial place, but even his family had not received any benefits. All of them had died. With this living example in front of them, they could not help but learn from it. They did not want to become the second Baikuan. As for how the 5-star army appeared in the city, this matter became a mystery and many people had a question mark in their hearts. Nanning House was taken down. As the capital of Guangxi, this had a huge meaning and alerted the South Ming troops in the other provinces. Right now, no one doubted whether the 5-star army would be able to conquer Guangxi. What they were thinking about was whether the 5-star army would continue to expand after conquering Guangxi. This was something that everyone was concerned about. Time passed day by day. After Baikuan was killed and Nanning Prefecture was broken through, the other prefectures in Guangxi all surrendered, to the extent that the world's 1st Cavalry Army, Cold Front 2nd Division, and Russia's 1st Division had no choice but to fight on different fronts. However, even if they split up their forces, their progress was still very fast. Without encountering any tough battles, the 5-star army's vanguard would often open their doors and surrender. Just like this, in less than a month, the entire Guangxi region was under the influence of the 5-star army. Yang Chendong had also achieved his goal when he first came to Yunnan House, which was to completely control Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi. In the 6th month of 1467 AD, when everyone's attention was on whether the 5-star army would continue to expand, Commander Xiaofeng's 2nd Division suddenly went south from Guangxi's Lianzhou Prefecture. With the firearms in their hands in a short 10 days, they took down Guangxi's Gaozhou Prefecture and Laizhou Prefecture. This action shocked Guangdong's Chief Minister Yang Xian, who had been paying attention to the 5-star army. Previously, his staff had made many hypotheses, but they did not think that the 5-star army would make a move on Guangdong. This sudden action made Yang Xian feel somewhat at a loss. Afterwards, he anxiously called for a meeting of Guangdong's rank 4 civil and military officials to discuss a solution. In the meeting, everyone was arguing incessantly. Some people felt that the 5-star army was not to be trifled with. If they rashly attacked, not only would they have no chance of winning, it would also easily drag the entire Guangdong region into the flames of war. In the end, they would follow in Guangxi's footsteps. If that happened, everyone would be sinners. There were also people who felt that it was fine to attack, but they had to obtain the emperor's orders. Otherwise, they would be acting without a valid reason. If the 5-star army only wanted to take over these 2 prefectures and did not intend to start a war on Guangdong, then if they took the initiative to attack, wouldn't they be forcing the 5-star army to make a decision? After all, there was news from the front lines that the 5-star army wanted to take over Laizhou Prefecture because it was close to the sea. It was convenient for the 5-star army to transport supplies to the 3 provinces. This was a bit forced. Taking over other people's land to transport supplies was a bit too much. However, in the end, who asked the 5-star army to be so strong? This method was not reasonable, but it was somewhat reasonable. There were also people who wanted to directly attack back. The people who made this suggestion were mostly generals with lower statuses. They felt that the 5-star army taking over Gaozhou and Laizhou was already a provocation to the entire southern Ming Empire. If they did not attack back, where would their face be? Facing all kinds of thoughts, there was still no final decision even when the sky turned dark. Yang Xian could only announce the end of the meeting and return to his own residence's backyard. It must be said that this was a place that he often appeared in recently. The reason why he often came here was because there was an extremely important person living in the courtyard. Usually when Yang Ding wanted to enter, he had to report his arrival. But this time he didn't care so much. He directly broke in with a few servants and saw Minister Xie Chongshu, who was writing memorials in the room. Xie Chong, Minister of Rights of the Southern Ming Empire. A month ago he was ordered by Emperor Zhu Qizhan to Guangxi to prepare to negotiate with Bugnam of Gojoseon. But no one knew that Xie Chongshu was very afraid of death in his bones. There were no more records of this person in history. Only some unofficial records recorded that he was once a grand scholar, but his ranking was not very high. The reason why he was able to become the Minister of Rights was because there was no one in the Southern Ming Empire. In addition, he was willing to give money to those eunuchs. Because he was afraid of death, Xie Chong walked slowly the entire way. As a result, he only arrived at the capital of Guangdong province 10 days ago. When he arrived, there was already news that the five-star army had taken over the entirety of Guangxi. Xie Chong was unable to accept this result. Didn't he receive a report from the imperial court a while ago that Baikuan had built a human wall in Nanning and blocked the advance of the five-star army? However, how long had it been? How could the entire territory be taken over by the five-star army? Since Guangxi was gone, Xie Chong's mission was also gone. He quietly entered Sir Yang Fu's residence without alerting anyone. From his point of view, it was very likely that the imperial court would send a new decree. At that time he could return to the capital and leave this dangerous place. However, who would have thought that the five-star army would take an inch and want a mile? Not only did they take over Guangxi, they even sent troops to occupy Gaozhou and Laizhou. This was not something that the Southern Ming Empire could tolerate. Thus, he wrote another letter to the imperial court and waited for the new decree. Others did not know that Xie Chong had come to Guangdong, but as the host, Yang Xian, was very clear. Xie Chong lived in the backyard of his residence. If he wanted to see him, he could do so after notifying him. Tonight, he suddenly barged into the courtyard because he wanted to ask what the emperor and the imperial court were thinking. Facing the aggressive five-star army, whether they wanted to fight or make peace, they had to give an explanation. "You're here. Have a seat." Xie Chong did not care about Yang Xian barging in at night. This was someone else's residence. If they wanted to come in, they could come in. Why would they need his permission? Not to mention he also had some things to say to Yang Xian. "Lord Minister, the situation outside is very chaotic. It is very difficult for me." After sitting down, Yang Xian began to complain. I know. Lord Yang, don't worry. I have already sent an urgent letter to the imperial court. I believe that there will be a reply soon. Don't worry. Xie Chong was already panicking. However, in order to stabilize the morale of the soldiers and the people, he pretended to be comforting. Hearing that the letter had been sent, Yang Xian's expression became much better. Presumably, the imperial court would not blame him for losing Gaozhou and Laizhou after knowing that the five-star army had sent out such a powerful force. If that was the case, it would be much easier to deal with this matter. At this moment, he was also grateful that Minister Xie Chong was here. At least, his position was not the highest. Something really happened, he would not have to take the blame. Although his mood became better, it was impossible to say that he was completely at ease. After all, he was the chief minister of Guangdong, the highest-ranking official here. If something happened in Guangdong, Xie Chong would be punished. He would not be any better. Since there were no outsiders here, Yang Xian could ask some probing questions. "Minister Xie, you see that the five-star army doesn't care about anything. Shouldn't we also do some defensive work? For example, the teaming guard is not far from Gaozhou. Can we order them to prepare for battle in advance?" Yes, Xie Chong said after thinking for a moment. Before receiving a new decree from the imperial court, no one knew what the emperor's decision would be. If the emperor decided to fight and he did not make any preparations, wouldn't he be delaying the important matter? He could not bear this responsibility. However, preparations were still preparations. After thinking for a while, Xie Chong said, "Lord Yang, you can order the Guanghai Guard to make appropriate preparations. However, you must remember that if the five-star army does not intend to continue east, do not take the initiative to provoke them. Violators will be punished according to military law." Chapter 16:15. Understood. This was also what Yang Xian wanted to say. He did not want the five-star army to attack because of his wrong decision. If that happened, there was an 80% chance that the Guangzhou prefecture would follow in the footsteps of the Nanning prefecture. The problem was, after the five-star army conquered Guangxi, Would they continue to attack the east and conquer Guangdong? The answer was in Yang Qindong's heart: they would not. There were many reasons why they would not do so. For example, they did not have enough excuses, they did not have a good reason to attack, the current southern Ming was quite strong, and if they continued to fight, both sides would suffer losses, etc. Ultimately, Yang Qindong or Yang Xia and the Five-Star Army were not fully prepared. 6 years ago, because Yuandong province was attacked, Yang Qindong personally led the army and fought until now. The results of these 6 years were so great that it completely exceeded Yang Qindong's expectations. Before this, he wasn't mentally prepared for this. Even if they conquered 3 provinces this time, it was because of Zhu Huihua's provocation. Otherwise, Yang Qindong would have returned to Chichen City to rest. The situation was already beyond his expectations. The management staff could not keep up, and the army also needed to rest after a long battle. If he wanted to attack southern Ming, he did not know how much military resources and supplies he would need. Before all of these were prepared, Yang Qindong wanted to stop here. Of course, if southern Ming took the initiative to provoke him, then he would not be polite. If he didn't have enough management personnel, he could just use the old people from the southern Ming Empire. Then, when there were new people, he could slowly replace them. Although doing this would cause instability in the rear, Yang Qindong wouldn't admit defeat when facing the southern Ming Empire's army. As for conquering Gaozhou and Laizhou, Yang Qindong really wanted to open up a sea supply route. In this way, all kinds of military supplies could enter the 3 provinces faster, and it would play a great role in stabilizing the situation. With such benefits, he had no choice but to do it. As for whether this would cause the southern Ming Empire to be disgusted or even take the initiative to send troops, Yang Qindong didn't want to think too much about it. What's the matter? You guys didn't care when Zhu Huiqiang sent troops to Langsun. You guys even supported Zhu Huiqiang with cannons. You even let Wang Mubin of Shiping deal with me. Taking down these 2 houses would be considered as interest. That was what Yang Qindong thought. After allowing Xiao Feng to take down Laizhou Prefecture, he ordered Leng Feng and the 2nd Division to build a port to receive the resources from Chichen City. He himself was waiting for the southern Ming Imperial Court to send someone to negotiate with him. Although there was a southern Ming envoy named Zhou Xiang in the Nanning Prefecture, Yang Qindong wasn't going to talk to him. This person's rank was too low. He had already received news that Minister Xie Chong had personally come. Since that was the case, it was better to have a chat with this person. Zhou Xiang, who had been neglected, was much more haggard than a month ago. He didn't know what was going on outside. He couldn't sleep well and didn't eat well. He had lost more than 5 kilograms. He had also requested to meet with His Highness Bugnam of Gojoseon more than once. At this moment, he no longer had the arrogance from before. Even when he spoke to a courier, he was very polite. However, even though he was polite, the courier didn't take him seriously. Perhaps it could be said that the order he received was to watch Zhou Xiang and the others. Everything else had nothing to do with him. He had requested for a meeting for several days. In order to achieve his goal, he had even taken out all of his valuables. It was all to curry favor with a courier. However, there was still no progress. At first, he thought that the other party thought it was too little, so he kept increasing the price. However, in the end, he realized that the other party really didn't want to accept it. On this point, Zhou Xiang was filled with emotions. Since ancient times, there had been a saying that there were 7 rank officials in front of the Prime Minister's door. It was said that the status of a servant was similar to that of the master. When the master was powerful, the small people under him could also benefit and even rise to the heavens. Just like in the current southern Ming dynasty, many servants of the big families were all arrogant. Sometimes they could even complete some tasks that only the officials could do. When they returned, they would receive some benefits. This was something that everyone tacitly agreed upon. After all, many things that the master wanted to do required the servants to complete. Why didn't this work in the 5-star army? Just from this small matter, one could see the power of the 5-star army. He couldn't even bribe a small courier. Zhou Xiang didn't know what else he could do. Just like that, the days passed with sighs and sighs. Until one day Ba Daojiang suddenly appeared in the courier. When Zhou Xiang saw the other party, tears actually flowed out of his eyes. It was as if he had seen his family after many years. At this moment, Zhou Xiang was indeed very emotional. He had finally met someone who kept his word. Assistant Minister Zhou, what happened to you? Could it be that someone mistreated you? Ba Daojiang was also shocked by the tears flowing out of Zhou Xiang's eyes. He instinctively thought that someone had done something unfavorable to the southern Ming dynasty. No. Seeing that Ba Daojiang had misunderstood, Zhou Xiang shook his head and said, "We are very good here. There is enough food and drink and there is a lot of variety. It is really good. This wasn't to say that Zhou Xiang was flattering, but it was the truth. When it came to food, Yang Shi would never be thrifty or diligent when it came to it. Using a sentence that Yang Qindong once said, if one wanted to change every day, they wouldn't even be satisfied with food. If they couldn't change, then what change was there to change? Ba Daojiang nodded his head in satisfaction after hearing this. He also didn't believe that someone would dare to do such a thing. The 5-star army rewarded the soldiers with great merits very generously, but at the same time, the punishment for the soldiers who made mistakes was also very severe. It was just like how the soldiers didn't dare to accept Zhou Xiang's money. Because once they accepted it, it wasn't a matter of whether they could keep their money, but whether they could keep their lives. At that time, their family would also be humiliated because of it. Everything was just for a bit of money, but they had to pay such a heavy price. It was no wonder that although the soldiers were tempted, none of them dared to accept the money. Ba Daojiang knew that there wasn't a problem with the treatment, but he was even more curious. Why was Zhou Xiang crying when they met again after not seeing each other for more than a month? Speaking of which, they didn't have much of a relationship before, and this was only the second time they met. Moreover, the experience of meeting for the first time wasn't something that could make one happy, right? How could Ba Daojiang understand Zhou Xiang's emotions? After all, if he hadn't been imprisoned for more than a month, he wouldn't be able to understand that feeling. It was just that the smart Zhou Xiang would not voice out his feelings during this period of time. If he had the slightest bit of resentment, he was afraid that he would provoke the other party and leave in a huff. If that happened, he would not be able to call out to the heavens and the earth. He did not know how long he would have to endure. Not only did he not dare to complain, he also pretended to be fawning and asked, "Sir, is Bugnam of Gojoseon here to see this official?" "Oh, that's not it." Ba Daojiang became more serious when they talked about serious matters. Little did he know that the moment he said this, Zhou Xiang's mood instantly fell to the bottom. If he wasn't here to see him, was he just here to greet him? Or was he here to see if he and the others were dead? Or was he here to end his life? When he thought of the latter, Zhou Xiang's face turned green, then quickly turned pale. It was obvious that he was really afraid. Ba Daojiang saw Zhou Xiang's expression and already guessed what he was thinking. He couldn't help but chuckle and say, "Assistant Minister Zhou, don't think too much. This time, I'm here on Bugnam of Gojoseon's orders to let you and the others go. We've already received news that your Minister of Rights, Xie Chong, has arrived at the Guangzhou government. Since he's here, it's better to let him handle the negotiations. You can go back now and inform Minister Xie to come to the Nanning government. At that time, Bugnam of Gojoseon will also arrive at the Nanning government. If there's anything, it's better to discuss it in detail there." After saying this, Ba Daojiang seemed to have thought of something and added, "By the way, Bugnam of Gojoseon is busy with military affairs and has many things to deal with. Therefore, I hope that Minister Xie can arrive at the Nanning government as soon as possible. If it's too late, I'm afraid that Bugnam of Gojoseon won't be able to hold back and continue to mobilize his troops. If that happens, then no one can be blamed. That's enough. I've delivered the message, so I'm leaving. Assistant Minister Zhou, you can pack up and leave with the diplomatic group as soon as possible." Ba Daojiang didn't care about Zhou Xiang's reaction. After saying this, he turned around and left, leaving Zhou Xiang with his back to him. Zhou Xiang stood in the same place for more than 10 breaths. After pondering over Ba Daojiang's words, Zhou Xiang suddenly let out a scream. Then he shouted, "Hurry, hurry, pack up, we're leaving now, right now." In the 3 provinces' king's residence, Yang Qindong was talking to Yao Yingjun in the main hall. The entire Guangxi had become one of Yang Xie's territories. Yunnan and Guizhou had begun to stabilize after more than a month of turmoil, so Yang Qindong had no need to stay here. After all, he wasn't Zhu Huiyun, nor was he the 3 provinces' king. In his eyes, there was only a palm-sized area. He called Yao Yingjun over to listen to his work report and the next step of the work plan. Fortunately, after more than a month of learning, Yao Yingjun had begun to adapt to his current work, and he was getting better and better at it day by day. In front of Yang Qindong, Yao Yingjun roughly explained the plans of the 3 provinces for the next few years. The main focus was on the migration of the people, distribution of land, and economic development. Chapter 16:16. In the process of listening to the report, Yang Qindong would add some of his own opinions from time to time. Yao Yingjun kept nodding as he listened and then took notes. Evidently, being able to hear Yang Qindong's direct teachings was something that all of the Yangxia officials were envious of. It took more than 2 hours for the report to be completed. At the end, Yao Yingjun looked at Yang Qindong and said, "Sixth young master, I have a request that I hope you can agree to." "What is it?" "Tell me." Yang Qindong thought that Yao Yingjun wanted financial support. After all, it was impossible to move without money. "Sixth young master, I would like to send my wife, Julienne, to Chichen City. As you know, I will have a lot of work to do. I'm afraid that I won't have time to take care of my family in the near future, so..." How was this about not having time to take care of his family? Yao Yingjun was basically handing his family's weakness to Yang Qindong. Soon he would become a high-ranking official in the local government, a high-ranking official with real power in his hands. Moreover, he was so close to the southern Ming dynasty. Who knew how many people would want his position and play tricks behind his back? In order to prevent Yang Qindong from suspecting him, Yao Yingjun decided to send his family to Chichen City. This way the trust level would be much higher. For Yao Yingjun to make such a decision, it was enough to prove that he was a smart person. Yang Qindong liked to interact with smart people. This way he could save a lot of effort. Of course, Yang Qindong was more concerned about old friendships. Ever since Yao Yingjun joined the Yang faction, he had been working in the secret battlefront. It was not easy for him to lead an army privately. Now that he had to send his family away in such a short time, it was too cruel for him. Yang Qindong didn't want to leave an impression that he couldn't tolerate or trust people. Therefore, when faced with Yao Yingjun's request, he only said after a moment of silence, "Julienne doesn't need to go to Crimson City. She has lived here since she was young, and I'm afraid she won't be able to adapt to other places. Without you accompanying her, it would be even more boring. This young master doesn't want to break apart a couple, huh?" Yang Qindong actually refused. Although Yao Yingjun was happy, he was also anxious. This was the time for him to show his loyalty. He could not give up just because of Yang Qindong's rejection. Wouldn't that give others the impression that he was acting? More importantly, he would feel uneasy if he didn't reveal anything that could be used against him. At that time, he was afraid that there would only be other methods to monitor him. That would also be very uncomfortable. As such, Yao Yingjun decided to try again, saying, "Sixth young master, this subject has already discussed this with my wife and she has agreed. All right, this young master can understand how you feel. However, Julienne and you truly love each other, so it's best that you don't separate. Besides, you're tired from work and need someone to take care of you. How about this? Don't you have 2 children? Send them to Crimson City to study with this young master's princes and princesses. They'll have feelings for each other from a young age, and in the future, they'll be able to help them achieve greater things. Perhaps they'll be even more impressive than you, their father, ha." He had thought that Yang Qindong had rejected him because he had better methods to monitor him. However, after hearing this, Yao Yingjun's tears immediately flowed out. Even though sending his 2 children to Crimson City was also a form of hostages. However, it was undeniable that this result was much better than sending Julienne over. At least, as Yang Qindong had said, letting the children interact with each other would be very beneficial for the children's development in the future. Yang Qindong had already conquered a lot of land, and there was no need to say anything more. His children would inherit a lot of the family business, and now that they had a good relationship with the future successors, many Yangxia generals hoped for this. Now that it had fallen on his head, it would be a lie if he wasn't emotional. Yang Qindong didn't like to see people cry, especially men crying in front of him, so he quickly waved his hand and said, "All right, wipe your tears. If you want to thank the young master, you have to do the work at hand well. If there's anything you can't solve, you can send a telegram at any time. If there's anything disobedient, you can execute it and report it. The young master will support you." This was equivalent to receiving an imperial edict. Yao Yingjun once again prostrated himself on the ground and shouted, "Long live the king." However, everyone knew that it wouldn't take long for this to become 10,000 years. At this time, Yangxia was so big that it had far surpassed the Great Ming. If Yang Qindong didn't become an emperor, the people below would probably be unhappy. Yao Yingjun left with a grateful expression, and it was time for Yang Qindong to leave Yunnan. Immediately, 2,000 black cavalry followed to protect them, and the Third Army's commander, Wu Sheng, personally led the troops to escort them. The group left Yunnan Prefecture and went straight to Nanning Prefecture. When Yang Qindong left the city, all the people in Yunnan Prefecture moved out. They came out of their own accord to send Yang Qindong off. It was because of this person's arrival that the people's lives had undergone earth-shaking changes. Not only did they no longer need to worry about war and personal safety, but everyone was also given a new piece of land and had a goal in life. This was something that many people had never dreamed of. Riding on the white dragon and looking at the scene of the people sending him off, Yang Qindong said emotionally to Yao Yingjun, who was sending him off. Did you see that? Those who win the hearts of the people win the world. As long as the hearts of the people are there, there's nothing that can't be done. You local officials and officials must remember this. Yes, this subject will remember. Yao Yingjun replied as if he had been taught something. Nanning Prefecture. Commander Tian, who was riding a horse outside the city. There were several teachers with him. They all knew that the sixth young master would visit Nanning Prefecture today. For this, not only did they clean up the city again, they also sent many cavalry to protect him. Today the importance of Yang Qindong's safety was far greater than that of the Emperor of Southern Baiming. There were many Nanning people in the welcoming team. They stood on both sides of the road either out of curiosity or out of gratitude. Without the Wolf Fang special forces sent by Yang Qindong, all the people would have been killed by the cannons. Just based on this point, it was worth everyone coming out of the city to welcome Bugnam of Gojoseon. There was another group of people in the crowd. There were many of them, about 1,000 people. They were wearing the Southern Ming official uniform that was somewhat out of place. They were the Southern Ming officials led by the Southern Ming Minister of Rights, Xie Chong. After Zhou Xiang was allowed to leave Yunnan Prefecture, he rushed all the way to Guangzhou Prefecture and met the Minister of Rights, Xie Chong. After repeating the words of Ba Dao River, Xie Chong could no longer remain calm. He left Guangzhou Prefecture overnight and went straight to Nanning Prefecture. Xie Chong couldn't guess whether Yang Qindong would continue to send troops or not. However, he definitely couldn't allow the five-star army to send troops because of him. If he really did that, he was afraid that the emperor would be furious. He only had one head and it wouldn't be enough to chop it off. After rushing for a while, he finally reached Nanning Prefecture before Yang Qindong. Xie Chong was smart enough not to enter the city. In order to express his attitude, he decided to wait here for Yang Qindong to enter the city first. Although it was said that Yang Qindong already had the intention of lowering his head, but thinking about it, Yang Qindong was Wu Nanwang, who was recognized by the two emperors of the Great Ming Dynasty. It was not a big deal for a subject to be respectful to a king. Tian Hu and the others could understand why Xie Chong would appear here. Especially when they saw that the Minister of Rights, who was so high and mighty, had to respectfully welcome their king at this moment, they felt even more honored. Didn't this also prove that the strength of the five-star army was constantly rising? As everyone was looking forward to it, a black shadow finally appeared in the distance. Then, one after another, the bright five-star army flag could be seen. It's Bugnam of Gojoseon. Everyone line up. Tian Hu saw that the troops were getting closer and closer, so he hurriedly shouted. This time, because Division Commander Xiao Feng was in Laizhou Prefecture supervising the construction of the harbor, he didn't rush to Nanning Prefecture. Thus he became the boss here. If something went wrong, he would have to bear the main responsibility, so he couldn't help but be careful. Fortunately, the elite warriors of the world's #1 cavalry army were arranged everywhere, so safety shouldn't be a problem. About half an hour later, Yang Qindong's troops finally arrived in front of Nanning Prefecture's west gate. Tian Hu had already brought everyone to stand on both sides and saluted to welcome them. At the same time, his eyes were filled with excitement as he looked at Yang Qindong. Although they hadn't been apart for long. Without Yang Qindong's command, the world's #1 cavalry army seemed to have lost its soul and felt all kinds of uneasy. Now that they could fight side by side with the sixth young master, of course everyone was excited. You've all worked hard. Yang Qindong, who was riding on the white dragon, returned a military salute when he arrived in front of Tian Hu and the others. Then, his gaze seemed to intentionally look in Xie Chong's direction, but he ignored him and entered the city accompanied by Tian Hu and the others. In a distant corner, Vice Envoy Zhou Xiang said excitedly, Bugnam of Gojoseon saw us, he saw us. I know. What are you shouting for? What are you doing? Xie Chong also saw this scene, but he wasn't very excited. On the contrary, he felt that Yang Qindong cared about ignoring him, which made him feel very uncomfortable. However, when he thought about how his strength was inferior, what else could he do besides lowering his head? Finally, Yang Qindong, who was surrounded by people, entered the city. Xie Chong also tidied up his clothes and prepared to enter the city. Just now, not only did he see Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Qindong, but he also saw the might of the world's #1 cavalry army. It had to be said that this cavalry army not only had a large number of people, but they were also skilled in horse riding. Under their control, all the war horses didn't make any sound, and none of the war horses jumped out of the formation, which was very terrifying. Chapter 16-17. It must be known that these were livestock, not humans. To be able to make them so obedient, it must have taken a lot of effort. Based on this, it could be seen that this cavalry was not ordinary. Xie Chong, who had learned riding and archery, had his own horse. He still remembered that it took a long time to tame it. In the end, he was only able to ride it. He could not reach the level of familiarity with it like the cavalry in front of him. Even a single horse could not do this, let alone so many war horses. From this point, this was an army that was not easy to deal with. Coincidentally, in the entire southern Ming army, there were no decent cavalry. Due to the environment, the 5 million soldiers of the southern Ming army were almost all infantrymen. Comparing them, wasn't it obvious who was superior? Thus, Xie Chong had a rough understanding of the strength of the five-star army. In his heart, he was thinking that it would be better if he could negotiate. As long as Bugnam of Gojoseon's request was not too excessive, so what if he satisfied him? After all, if they really fought, the southern Ming army's chances of winning were too low. Yang Qindong naturally did not know that the world's #1 cavalry army's formation to welcome him would scare Xie Chong. After he entered the city, he stationed himself in the largest courtyard in the city. This was a place that Tianhu specially prepared for Yang Qindong to rest. The courtyard was very clean. There was a rockery, a garden, and a pond. The environment looked very good. You are considerate. After Yang Qindong roughly looked around the courtyard, he nodded to Tianhu in satisfaction. Then he said, "Go and arrange it. Let the southern Ming envoy come and see me." At this point, Yang Qindong did not intend to continue fighting with the southern Ming army. Since they were not fully prepared, they would stop fighting first. Of course, since he had the upper hand, he needed to ask for some benefits. He was also confident that the southern Ming army would agree to his request. Because compared to him, the other side was not prepared for war. Not fighting? Tianhu was shocked. After all, for a battlefield-killing god like him, if there was no war, it would not reflect their value. After asking this question, Tianhu was somewhat regretful. He should not have questioned such a big matter. Although he was Yang Qindong's student and was now the famous commander of the world's #1 cavalry army, there were some things that he could not ask. On the contrary, Yang Qindong did not show any dissatisfaction. Let's see what the southern Ming Empire's attitude is first. After all, everyone here is Han. It's best if we don't fight. To be able to give such an answer, Tianhu was already very satisfied. Then he said, Tianhu's #1 cavalry. Although Yang Qindong had been the Bugnam of Gojoseon for more than 10 years, he was still unable to adapt to his current role. Therefore, he gave such an answer to Tianhu's question. If it was the two emperors of the southern Baiming or Zhu Huihua, they would definitely not answer this question. Tianhu moved quickly and quickly sent people to find Xie Chong and the others in the city. Then he led them to Yang Qindong's temporary residence. In the main hall, both sides were able to meet. Facing Xie Chong, Yang Qindong could not be so casual. He first sat on the main chair in the main hall. When Xie Chong appeared, the other party could only look up to see him. Southern Ming Ministry of Rights Minister Xie Chong greets Bugnam of Gojoseon. Ministry of Rights Left Assistant Minister Zhou Ziong greets Bugnam of Gojoseon. Dispense with the formalities. Yang Qindong raised his hand and said with a calm expression. Then, without saying anything, he asked directly, "Both of you, I heard that you are here to negotiate on behalf of the Southern Ming Imperial Court. What are your rules? Why don't you tell me everything?" Xie Chong was obviously not used to Yang Qindong's straightforward way of opening. Shouldn't both sides talk about their daily lives and friendship first before talking about business? Now he was asking about the other party's trump card. Anyone with a bit of common sense in negotiations would not ask such a question. Did Yang Qindong not know how to negotiate? Of course not. Yang Qindong's political wisdom was not low. The reason why he said this was to create pressure on the other party and let them know that the initiative of the negotiation was in his hands. The use of the word negotiation made it even more obvious that the Yang faction and the Southern Ming Empire were on equal footing. It wasn't a matter of who was the subordinate of the other. Otherwise there would not be such a term. Xie Chong was not used to Yang Qindong's rhythm and method. For a moment he did not know what to say. Yang Qindong deliberately frowned. What? Did this prince misunderstand? You are not here to negotiate but to declare war? All right, this prince understands your intentions. Please go back now. Please also tell the Southern Ming Emperor that we will meet on the battlefield. Come, send the guests out. Yes. Beta Persei at the side immediately said and prepared to step out. This action gave Xie Chong a fright. Although some words were easy to say and unpleasant to hear, he really was here to negotiate on behalf of the Southern Ming Empire. Especially before the Southern Ming Empire was ready for war, it was better not to fight this war. And if the war continued because of him, the emperor would not be appeased even if he was killed. No, Bugnam of Gojoseon misunderstood. We are indeed here to negotiate. Xiachong knew that he could not continue pretending. In order to complete his mission, he had no choice but to lower his head at this moment. From the moment he said this, it also proved that he recognized Yang Xie and the Southern Ming Empire as existences on the same level. Alright, then tell me your thoughts. Yang Qindong wanted this kind of rhythm. Facing the somewhat aggressive Yang Qindong, Xiachong found that the words he prepared before could not be used. For example, the words that insisted that Yang Qindong was still a subject of the Great Ming Empire could not be said. This was because the other party was not afraid of war at all. On the contrary, he was the one who was afraid of war. However, there were still some words that needed to be said. Under Yang Qindong's guidance, Xiachong opened his mouth. Prince Bugnam of Gojoseon, Emperor Ingzong's intention is to allow you to establish a new power outside of the Southern Ming Empire. The Southern Ming Empire's imperial court will recognize the existence of this new power. However, the current Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi must be returned to the Southern Ming Empire. This includes the captured Shiping King Mu Bin, Sanxing King Zhu Huifu, and the others. Also, enough. Just by listening to the beginning, Yang Qindong knew that the Southern Ming Empire did not see how powerful he was. At this moment, they were still holding on to unrealistic fantasies. Did they really think that he was just a king with a different surname and did not dare to fall out with the Southern Ming Empire? Yang Qindong did not make a move now because he was not fully prepared. He did not want more Han people to lose their homes and lives because of war. This was not because he was afraid. On the contrary, if he was really angered, even if he made a move now, he could guarantee that he would win this war. Moreover, the 5-star army would definitely obtain the final victory. At most, he would have to pay a higher price and more Han people would die. It was because he considered the safety of the civilians that Yang Qindong decided to temporarily stop advancing. However, this did not mean that he was afraid. If Zhu Qizhen had such thoughts, then there was no need for this peace talk. Xiachong's expression turned a little ugly when he was rejected after just 2 sentences. However, considering that the 5-star army was at its peak, he suppressed the anger in his heart and said, "However, I wonder what Bugnam of Gojoseon's intentions are?" This prince's intentions? It's very simple. As long as the Southern Ming Empire agrees to these requests, our Yangxia army will stop advancing and guarantee that we will not invade. Oh? This lowly official is willing to listen to Bugnam of Gojoseon's intentions. Hearing that the 5-star army would stop advancing, Xiachong was also interested. As for the so-called conditions, there was nothing to lose by listening to it first, right? Moreover, since you have brought up the conditions, we can discuss them later. Let's not talk about whether we can come to an agreement or not. At least, there was one point that could be delayed for a while. As such, under the gazes of Xiachong and Zhou Xiang, Yang Qindong opened his mouth. This war was originally planned by your Southern Ming Empire. Don't deny it. If it wasn't for your tacit approval, Zhu Huiqiu wouldn't have had the guts to attack my Liangshan. Shiping King Mu Bin wouldn't have sent his men to kill this prince without orders and then personally led his troops to attack this prince. Also, the cannons used to attack this prince were also transported from your Southern Ming kingdom, right? This should be enough to prove everything. All along, this prince has scrupulously abided by the duties of a subject. Even if the 5-star army was extremely powerful and wiped out all the foreign races around the Great Ming Empire, this prince still respected the Great Ming Empire greatly. Not only did this prince not have the intention to attack, but this prince also provided large amounts of food to the imperial court. Furthermore, the price was so low that this prince had to use money to subsidize it. However, on the other hand, how did you treat this prince? Blindly wanting to kill this prince. Speaking of this, it really makes one's heart cold. Although it is said that if the ruler wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die, this prince has done so many things for the Great Ming Empire. Even back then at the Tumu Castle, if this prince did not make a move, Ingzong would have already met with disaster. Since this is the case, this prince has already done his duty as a subject. Now that the ruler wants to kill this prince, then this prince will live for himself this time. When these words entered Xiachong's ears, he couldn't help but lower his head. Many of the things that Yang Qindong had accused the Southern Ming Empire of were true. If they really wanted to make a fuss about it, then the Southern Ming Empire had indeed let down Yang Qindong. This was because all along Yang Xie had always been the party that paid the price, and the Southern Ming Empire was the party that received benefits. However, the result now was that Yang Qindong had to die. This was too much of a bully. If Xie Chong had Yang Xie's powerful strength, he would probably not be able to resist jumping up and opposing the Southern Ming Empire. Chapter 16-18. Since Xie Chong did not speak, Zhou Ziong was even more speechless. It was clear that they were the weaker side in this negotiation. Even if the peace talks ended, the Southern Ming Empire would only suffer losses. Even so, no matter who initiated the negotiations, the emperor would not be satisfied. At this time there was no way to hide. Who would take the initiative to charge forward? Since the envoy and deputy did not speak, Yang Qindong continued, "Even if you are not benevolent, this prince cannot be unjust. After all, this is a place where the Han people live. This prince is also a Han official. If this prince does not have to use military force, this prince is unwilling to use it. However, this prince must give an explanation for the previous matter. This is also an explanation for this prince and the officials under this prince. Thus, I will raise the following conditions. First, the Southern Ming Empire must recognize Yang Xie's legal authority over Yunnan, Guizhou, and Guangxi. These territories were taken from Zhu Huiyun by this prince. It was also because of Zhu Huiyun's request that I went to Southern Yun Manor. Now that the development has been settled, there must be an explanation. Second, other than Guangdong's Laizhou Manor, the Southern Ming Empire also needs to open up Chaozhou Manor, Fuzhou Manor, Taizhou Manor, Ningbo Manor, Songjiang Manor, and Huayan Manor. Our Yang Xie can build a military port there. Of course, the sovereignty of these places will still belong to the Southern Ming Empire. Our Yang Xie is also willing to pay some rent. Third, as a fellow Han, this prince will definitely not watch the Han people suffer. If the Southern Ming Empire's policies or the officials do not care for the people, causing some people to want to leave the Southern Ming Empire for our Yang Xie, the Southern Ming Empire will not stop them. We should respect the people's choice. If someone tries to stop them, then I, Yang Xie, will reserve the right to send troops to rescue them. Fourth, Yang Xie is willing to continue trading with the Southern Ming Empire. However, the Southern Ming Empire must guarantee the safety of the Yang Xie merchants. If something happens to them, Yang Xie will also reserve the right to send troops to rescue them. Fifth, for the prosperity of trade, Yang Xie is permitted to open banks in the Southern Ming Empire. Of course, we will pay the taxes that should be paid on time. However, if someone has designs on the bank, then we will also protect the right to rescue them. Sixth, due to the bad weather this year, the grain harvest in the Yang Xie region is poor, and the price of grain will increase by 30%. In some remote areas, the price of grain may increase by 40% to 50%. I hope that the Southern Ming Imperial Court can understand this. After all, the price of rations will be higher if there is less. This kind of thing has happened many times. 7. Yang Xie is willing to have more exchanges with the Southern Ming Empire. After the various ports are built, Yang Xie will have specialized passenger ships to open up the waterway from Chichen City to the Southern Ming Empire. At that time, if the Southern Ming Empire is willing to send people to Chichen City for inspection, they can apply first. After they pass the inspection, they can enter Yang Xie's land to study and learn. 8. Yang Xie. Yang Qindong already had a draft in his mind. Things came out of his mouth one after another, and his requests also increased. Hearing this, Xie Chong could not help but break out in cold sweat. As for the specific terms of the negotiation, it still needed to be analyzed word by word. However, after hearing this, Xie Chong already knew one thing. That was, from this moment onwards, the Southern Ming Empire and Yang Xie were no longer subordinate to each other, although they were not in the past. However, from this moment onwards, the two sides were on equal footing. Yang Qindong's ambition had already been exposed. However, even if this was the case, what could Xie Chong say? Could he say that he did not agree? Could he say that the Southern Ming Empire would send an army to teach the five-star army how to behave? If he could not do this, then it was better not to mention it. The situation was stronger than the person, and the fist was not as strong as the person. If he still wanted to reason with the other party, that was not courage but stupidity. After nearly half an hour, Yang Qindong roughly explained his requests. Then he looked at Xie Chong's pale face and said, "This is only the preliminary negotiation outline that this king has drafted. As for the specific matters, I, Yang Xie's foreign affairs chief, will discuss it with Minister Xie. You can also send this general request back to the Southern Ming Empire's capital, so that the emperor will know first. However, there is one thing that this king wants to make clear. The Southern Ming Empire must agree to the above conditions. Otherwise, the Southern Ming Empire will be seen as insincere. Next, just treat it as self-protection. The iron cavalry of the five-star army will not stop moving forward. At that time, don't say that I, Yang Qindong, did not take into account the relationship between the monarch and his subjects. Okay, Beta Persei, send the guests off. The tall Beta Persei immediately stepped forward and said to Xie Chong and Zhou Xiang expressionlessly, "Two sirs, please. If that's the case, this official will take his leave." Xie Chong also knew that there was no point in arguing at this moment. Rather than that, it was better to immediately write a memorial to inform the imperial court of Yang Qindong's request. As for what to do next, it was a matter between the emperor and the imperial court. He could no longer interfere. Xie Chong and Zhou Xiang finally left. At the back of the main hall, a similarly sturdy middle-aged man walked in. His face was dignified without being angry. Just by looking at him, one could feel a sense of ferocity. And he was Yang Xie's foreign affairs chief, Ma Dali. Generally, as a diplomat, they needed to look more amiable and friendly. This way they would be more acceptable and their words would be more resonant. However, Yang Qindong did the opposite. His foreign affairs chief looked more frightening, and only this could better intimidate some people. After all, the current Yang Xie was incomparably powerful. The so-called negotiation ultimately depended on the strength of both sides. Otherwise, there wouldn't be the saying of weak countries having no diplomacy. It was precisely because they were strong enough that they needed to be tough in their diplomacy. This was something that Ma Dali did very well. He looked fierce, had a loud voice and had a bad temper. He would often scold people if they didn't agree with him. However, it was this kind of life that was most suitable for the current Yang Xie. This time, Ma Dali was transferred over from Resin City to play this role. It was to put pressure on the southern Ming Empire. Moreover, with Yang Qindong's current status, there were too many things that he needed to do. He wouldn't argue with the other party over something like negotiation. Ma Dali gladly accepted this task. Speaking of which, he could be considered an old member of Yang Xie. He had been the foreign affairs chief for nearly 10 years. This didn't conform to the Yang Xie system of changing officials. However, no one said anything about this matter. Why was that? The reason was simple. Don't look at the Foreign Affairs Department's reputation. Because of the strength of the five-star army, they would often destroy a country if they didn't agree with them. As such, the Foreign Affairs Department often existed in name only. It wasn't of much use at all, and there wasn't much for them to negotiate with. Over time, the Foreign Affairs Department's authority was greatly reduced. Anyone with ambition was unwilling to become an official in the Foreign Affairs Department. After all, what was the difference between becoming an official in a useless department and retiring? Ma Dali was extremely depressed because of this. He didn't believe that the Foreign Affairs Department would have nothing to do. He was just waiting for an opportunity. Although he had been treated coldly over the years, he still didn't give up. He was waiting. This was because he had carefully analyzed that their king was an extreme racialist. This could be seen from the rising status of the Han people. With this kind of thinking, they could deal with other foreign races and other countries, but only the Great Ming, which was the land of the Han, could not be so rashly sent out troops. Otherwise, it would definitely be a loss for the Han people. At this time, it was time for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to help. Ma Dali's thinking was right. As expected, a telegram was sent to the Foreign Affairs Department. Yang Qindong personally asked Ma Dali to bring a negotiation team to Nanning. When Ma Dali understood the deeper meaning behind this, he organized enough people to take a boat and arrived at Nanning before Yang Qindong. Just like before, he had heard the conversation between Yang Qindong, Xie Chong and Zhou Xiang. Now that he was angry, it was obvious that Yang Qindong wanted to hear his opinion. Previously, when he was hiding in the corner, he saw Xie Chong and Zhou Xiang's actions. At this moment, Ma Dali spoke with great confidence. "Sixth young master, don't worry. I will do my best to ensure that the Great Ming agrees to all of our conditions." This king believes that you won't. Department head Ma, feel free to do whatever you want. Even if the negotiations fail, there is no need to be afraid. When the time comes, our cavalry will directly enter Guangdong. Yang Qindong didn't want to give Ma Dali any pressure, so he smiled and said. Yang Qindong was working with the idea of slowly encroaching on the Great Ming's political power. However, if the Great Ming didn't cooperate, then he would have to cut the Gordian knot and take the initiative to send troops. Although this way the losses would be greater, but it might not be a bad thing to take over the Great Ming sooner. Yes, this subject understands. Ma Dali was full of confidence when he heard this. With a powerful military backing, what was there to be afraid of? Ma Dali left confidently. Yang Qindong stretched and looked at Beta Persei, who had returned from sending the guests away. He smiled and said, "How is it? You've been out for so long. Do you miss Madam?" Beta Persei scratched his head and smiled embarrassedly. This cute side of him could only be shown in front of Yang Qindong. In front of others, he was the majestic Beta Persei who killed people like flies. If you want it, then just say it. We have been out for more than 6 years. It's time to go back and take a look. When Beta Persei smiled, Yang Qindong already knew the answer and smiled as well. Over the years, Beta Persei had many women by his side when he was out on expeditions. Every time he captured a place, the powerful logistics department would organize the local women of different races to serve the 5-star army. At Beta Persei's level, the women who could be sent to his side were all beautiful women of different races. However, they were still not as good as his wife at home. Can we really go back? This little one, I really miss my children. Beta Persei smiled. Chapter 16-19. If you miss your wife, just say so. Yang Qindong chuckled, then waved his hand and said, "Okay, tell the Black Cavalry to pack up. The ship that will take us back to Chichen City should arrive at Laizhou Prefecture soon. We'll ferry home from there." Yang Qindong was going back to Chichen City. He had been out for more than 6 years. This might not be a big deal for a general who had fought in all directions, but for Bugnam of Gojoseon Yang Qindong, who was the leader of a force, it was really commendable to do this. After learning the news, Tian Hu and the others naturally did not say anything. They just met Yang Qindong and promised to maintain the status quo, and then respectfully sent Yang Qindong out of Nanning Prefecture to Laizhou Prefecture. As Yang Qindong boarded the ship and headed for Chichen City, some changes also took place in the palace of Chichen City. In the palace, all the maids were in a hurry as they walked through the halls. The smiles on their faces were gone, and there was only some tension in their faces. If one looked carefully, one could even see some fear in the tension. Because just a few days ago, the 8th Madam's bedchamber was suddenly surrounded by a large number of palace guards, and then it was not long before Junko was ordered to be put under house arrest in the palace. Not only that, all the maids in the palace were taken away, and then there was gossip that those maids were taken to the musical house, and then there would be very miserable sounds coming from there from time to time. The palace of the 8th Madam, which was originally lively and full of vitality, became silent. Except for the 8th Madam, Junko, and Princess Yang Xian, no one was spared, and all of them disappeared in the palace. The maids in the palace were a new batch, and it was said that they were sent by the princess, Queen Hu Yen, and they were responsible for monitoring Junko's every move. Since ancient times, the harem and the previous dynasty had a close relationship, which could not be cut off at will. Because in many cases, some things in the harem also represented some kind of signal. The harem could affect the previous dynasty, and the previous dynasty could also affect the harem. The 8th Madam was suddenly put under house arrest. Although the news was not publicly spread, some officials in Chichen City still knew about it. After all, it was so big that it was impossible for people to ignore it. In the original palace of Bugnam of Gojoseon, everyone got along very well. The Princess Hu Yen was educated and polite, and she was not a troublemaker. Although the other madams had different temperaments, most of them were born poor, and they wanted to fight in the palace, they did not have any clever means. More importantly, as the main character, Yang Qindong had not been in the Wangfu all these years. If they really wanted to fight, who would they fight for? Therefore, the harem of the harem in Bugnam of Gojoseon Earth was the most peaceful palace. Nothing had happened in all these years, but they never expected that this incident would be so big. They didn't even give a reason to the outside world. The princess consort suddenly took action, and the 8th Madam was put under house arrest. Of course, the so-called not giving a reason was because it was not publicly known, but most of the officials knew what was going on. That is, the 8th Madam, as a native of Japan, had pleaded with Bugnam of Gojoseon for the survival of the ninjas in her country. No matter what the reason was, at least in the eyes of outsiders, Junko had a part to play in it. But now the ninjas suddenly rebelled. Although they failed to assassinate Yang Qindong under the rock, their betrayal was exposed. The other 2 special ninjas, Kitamura and Yui Suzuki, also disappeared from the ninja base. This sudden disappearance of them from the 5-star army's line of sight was enough to explain everything. They were now synonymous with danger and betrayal. Not to mention, more than a month ago, Bugnam of Gojoseon's 4th brother, Yang Yang, was assassinated in Nanjing, the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. After investigation, the 5 assassins were all ninjas. All of this proved that they were dangerous. As the 8th Madam, Junko, who had pleaded for them, naturally couldn't get away from this matter. The 8th Madam was placed under house arrest, which made the palace that was usually very lively became silent. In a restaurant outside the Wang mansion, two middle-aged men were sitting and drinking. Because of their arrival, the entire floor they were in had been cleared. To be able to possess such authority, it was rare to see such a person in Crimson City. After all, this was the place where Wu Nanking's royal city was located. To put it in an exaggerated manner, the number of officials here was more than half of the entire Yang clan's territory. When there were too many officials, their power was naturally not that strong. But if one knew the identity of these two middle-aged men, then this matter was not strange. Everything was because these two had the surname Yang. One was called Yang Wu and the other was Yang Lu. That's right, these two were servants of the Wunan family. In the entire Yang family there were only 5 such family retainers. They belonged to the group of people who had followed Yang Qindong from the very beginning. Now, any one of them was a person of high status and power. Many times, their words were even more influential and effective than some of the Yang faction's chiefs. Now, these two servants were sitting together and talking about things. How could outsiders know? Any small matter that they talked about would cause a huge commotion if it was spread out. There's no need to be so formal. Yang Wu said with a smile as he took a bite of food. I'm used to it. Ah. Yang Lu laughed indifferently. Yang Wu understood Yang Lu's style. He knew that this person was prideful, lived a luxurious life, enjoyed life and liked power. So Yang Wu didn't say anything. Although doing this would have a negative impact if word got out, with their status and most importantly, their relationship with their master Yang Qindong, they really didn't care about this little bit of impact. After all, if there was really someone who accused them in front of Yang Qindong just because they had booked an entire floor of the restaurant, they would at most be warned to be careful. However, whether the person who complained would be able to withstand the combined wrath of the two Yang family servants, that was something that they really didn't know. Yang Wu smiled indifferently, and Yang Lu didn't take it seriously either. Back then he was reprimanded by Yang Qindong and even sent to the southern Ming kingdom to manage the intelligence department. Wasn't it because he was prideful and treated people to meals and received gifts every day? Since this impression had already been formed, so what if he went a little overboard? Not to mention Yang Lu had his reasons for doing this today. It was because some words could only be said in front of the two brothers. It was really not suitable to be spread out. Fifth brother, is the 8th madam really under house arrest? Did those ninjas really listen to the 8th madam's words and betray the young master? Seeing that they were almost done eating and drinking, Yang Lu began to ask questions. If such a question was asked by others, Yang Wu would not only reprimand but also warn the other party not to inquire about it. If it was serious, it was possible that he would directly order people to arrest them. But it was Yang Lu who asked, so it was a different story. He just thought that the other party was curious. Yang Wu smiled and replied, "The matter is so big, how can it be false? The 8th madam is indeed under house arrest. As for whether she is wronged or not, it still needs to be investigated. There will be results before it can be determined. But in my opinion, whether the 8th madam did it or not, I am afraid that this matter has to be blamed." "Oh? Why is that?" Yang Lu asked with great interest. "Do you still need to say it?" Yang Wu put down his chopsticks and organized his words. "The ninja's rebellion is a fact. Because the 8th madam had pleaded for her, it is not too much to punish her. This is also the first rebellion that appeared in Yangxia. If it is not dealt with heavily, what if similar things happen in the future? So this time it can only be said that the 8th madam was unlucky and hit the muzzle of the gun. I am afraid that this matter will not be dealt with properly." "So it is." Yang Lu nodded as if he just understood and then said, "Then in fifth brother's opinion, how should we solve it?" "We can't send the 8th madam to the death row, right? Who knows, the young master has already returned by boat. Everything depends on the young master's decision." Although Yang Wu said that he was in Kaisan City all year round, and even the safety of the palace was under his control, he did not dare to say anything about this kind of thing. This was the young master's family matter. As a servant, he only needed to obey and not do anything. That's right, the young master will be back soon. Everything will be done according to the young master's wishes. Yang Lu's eyes flashed with a light that no one could see, as if there was a hidden meaning in his words. But at this moment Yang Wu obviously did not understand it. Instead, he thought of another thing. He smiled and patted Yang Lu on the shoulder and said, "Lu, this time you saved the 4th master. You have made a great contribution. This time the young master will definitely reward you when he comes back. Maybe he will give you a good job. Have you thought of where to go?" This time, it was precisely because of Yang Lu's timely appearance that he was able to save the life of the 4th master, Yang Yanghe. With this, Yang Qindong would definitely give him a good job. This was also the reason why Yang Wu said this. Let's see how the young master arranges it. Even if he sends me back to the southern Ming dynasty, I am a servant, everything will be done according to the master's wishes. Yang Lu replied magnanimously. That's right, as a servant we should have this kind of awareness. Come let me give you a toast. Yang Wu smiled satisfactorily. In his eyes, his sixth brother had changed, he had become more mature. This was a good thing. They were both servants, they had trained together, they had risked their lives together. He sincerely hoped that he could become better. Yang Qindong returned to Kaisan City. He left in 1460 and came back 6 or 7 years later. After almost 7 years, he once again stepped on the new pier of Kaisan City. The accompanying Black Knights and Dragon Guards were also excited. Like Yang Qindong, they were also returning to their homeland after nearly 7 years. They were also humans and had their own feelings. Now that they could finally reunite with their families, everyone had a happy smile on their faces. Chapter 1620. According to the plan, 500 of you will follow the young master back to the palace. The rest of you go home and take a look. Beta Persei grinned as well. Following the plan that he had discussed with Qiu Vi, Dao Xiao, Ba Daojiang and the others on the ship, he chuckled. This was Chichen City, Yang Xie's headquarters. The First Army of the Cold Front had already returned after completing their mission in Yunnan Prefecture. After all, their training was still very important. Not only was there an elite army like the 1st Cold Front Division here, but there were other Cold Front divisions as well, including 2 Navy Cold Front divisions. With such a powerful force, no one would be able to harm Yang Qindong here. A team of 500 people was already considered a lot. Not to mention Yang Wu had already brought 3,000 Long Wei to the docks to welcome Yang Qindong. Beside Yang Wu stood another leader of the Long Wei. He was Ping Yu, who had disappeared for a long time. He was ordered to assist Yang Wu in the security of the palace. At the same time, he was also tasked with the task of training the new Long Wei. Ping Yu was also one of the veteran Black Cavalry. He had once protected Yang Qindong with Ba Daojiang and was deeply trusted. The 3,000 Long Wei behind him was the result of his training. They were all from clean families and were the cream of the crop among the young people. Individually, they were all experts who could fight against 10 or even dozens of people. After all, the Black Cavalry would also have sacrifices. They would slowly grow old, so replacement was very important. If they were not prepared in advance, the number and quality of the Black Cavalry would be worrying. Since Ping Yu was willing to accept such an important task, it was clear that Yang Qindong trusted him. When he saluted Yang Qindong at the docks, his eyes were cold and filled with the aura of a soldier who was willing to die for his bosom friend. Not bad. Yang Qindong watched as Ping Yu walked up to him and praised him generously. He even patted Ping Yu's shoulder to encourage him. Feeling Yang Qindong's big hand patting him, Ping Yu was very excited. He straightened his body and said, "Everything is what this subordinate should do. I only hope that the 6th young master can bring me along the next expedition. I also want to go to the battlefield to kill enemies." It's approved. Yang Qindong had always appreciated the general's willingness to unleash their fighting spirit without holding back. A general with vigor might not necessarily win a battle, but if he didn't even have vigor, it would be very difficult for such a general to win a battle. City Lord Yu Qian also brought a group of civil officials to the pier to welcome the arrival of their king. Compared to the last time he saw Yu Qian, he looked even older this time. Even his head was covered with white hair. Even when he walked, his footsteps were a bit unsteady. In history, this Yu Qian, who had long passed away, had his fate completely changed because of Yang Qindong's arrival. He was now Yang Xie's helmsman. It could be said that Yang Xie could not be where he was today without Yu Qian's efforts over the years. It was only in recent years that he became older and did not do everything himself like before. Instead, he put down his power and began to train young people like Luan Shaochen. But many times he still needed to make the final decision in the end. Yang Qindong had always been very respectful to this great hero. Without waiting for the other person to step forward, he took the initiative to walk over and extended his right arm. "Yu Qian, the wind is strong by the sea, you don't need to come over." I'm welcoming our hero, our king." Yu Qian, who was usually reserved, cracked a rare smile and said with a chuckle. Thinking back to when the two first met, Yu Qian was filled with hostility towards Yang Qindong. He had even tried to impeach Yang Qindong. Later on, he was tricked into coming to Crimson City. He was also very unwilling, thinking that Yang Qindong was a traitor of the Great Ming Dynasty. Establishing his own faction would only weaken the strength of the Great Ming Dynasty, and he was courting his own destruction. But when he really began to understand Yang Qindong's thoughts and saw what he did, the old man slowly changed his view. Later, he began to wholeheartedly devote himself to it, truly thinking about the future of the Yang family. Now, he was completely moved by Yang Qindong's actions. He also deeply understood a principle. If the Han people wanted to become stronger, they could only do so under the leadership of Yang Qindong. Yu Qian was not a stubborn person. This could be seen from how he commanded the defense of the capital in history. The reason why many people said that he was too straightforward was because he was not greedy as an official. This made many people feel that he was out of place. Just like when he was managing the entire Yangtze, many of his actions proved that he was a flexible person. Some of his ideas and actions also proved that some people could achieve great things as long as they were given enough trust. Yu Qian was indeed a person worthy of being entrusted with great matters. Whether it was his ability or his personal integrity, there was nothing to nitpick about. Thus, when he saw that Yu Qian was old, Yang Qindong could not bear to see him like this. He took the initiative to greet the other party and said that there were many things that he would need Yu Qian to handle in the future. Yu Qian happily replied, "Your Majesty, please be at ease. The Han people have not been liberated yet. These old bones of mine can still hold on." After greeting Yu Qian, the second person in line was the young Wan Xiaoqian. He was in his 30s, but compared to Yu Qian he was naturally younger. Currently, most of the matters in the city lord's residence were managed by him. In fact, after 2 terms as a provincial governor, he had indeed been tempered. Now he was handling the entire Yangtze issue quite well. But it was only not bad. Perhaps it was because of his background. Wan Xiaoqian was not muddle-headed on major matters, but he was always willing to stick to the small matters. In terms of ability and the overall situation, he was naturally far inferior to Yu Qian. This time, Yang Qindong returned to Qixing City to resolve this matter. Without Yu Qian to manage the specific matters, Yang Qindong decided to set up a cabinet. In the future, the major matters of Yangtze would be handled by the cabinet. "You are also not bad, but you need to continue to work hard." Yang Qindong looked at Wan Xiaoqian with a smile as if he was praising him, but also as if he was reminding him. As soon as these words were said, Wan Xiaoqian's face immediately became a little ugly. He knew that his recent actions were somewhat inappropriate, and if he said that he had no selfishness in this matter, he was afraid that he would not believe it. This matter was referring to the matter of the 8th Madame Junko. Because of the ninja rebellion, Junko was put under house arrest by the imperial concubine Hu Yan. This matter was a state matter, and it was also Yang Qindong's family matter. If Yu Qian expressed some opinions on this matter, it was not a big deal. After all, he was not qualified to do so. But the bad thing was that Yu Qian had not expressed his opinion, or he did not intend to express his opinion at all, but Wan Xiaoqian expressed his opinion, and that was, he questioned the actions of the imperial concubine Hu Yan. As everyone knew, Wan Xiaoqian's sister was Yang Qindong's 6th Madame Wan Xiaoyu. And the 6th Madame also gave birth to a son for Yang Qindong, named Yang Chang. According to the teachers of several princes, this Yang Chang was very smart. Yang Qindong's son was also very smart, his mother was also favored by the king, and his uncle was the deputy city lord. In fact, he was the future city lord candidate. When all these things were placed on one person, it was impossible not to think too much about it. Just like in the people, there were many people talking about it. The eldest Prince Yangbo was very good, but the youngest Prince Yang Chang was also very smart, and also had the opportunity to inherit Yang Qindong's position. No one knew who spread this rumor, but as time passed, it became more and more intense. At this moment, Wan Xiaoli, as the deputy city lord, privately expressed his disapproval of the imperial concubine Hu Yan's approach to the 8th Madame. This matter spread out, and it was natural to imagine what the people below would think. Those who did not know, only thought that Wan Xiaoqian was doing business. But those who knew some of the details were wondering if Wan Xiaoqian wanted to stand up for his sister, and also for his nephew to inherit the position. This matter inevitably spread to Yang Qindong's ears. Just when Beta Persei asked if there was a need to clarify that it was Yang Qindong's idea to put the 8th Madame under house arrest, he shook his head. He knew that there was no smoke without fire, and this was a good opportunity to test Wan Xiaoqian. Yang Qindong was in the prime of his life, and he really did not think too much about the so-called successor. If it wasn't for the fact that this trip to Southern Cloud Manor was somewhat risky, he wouldn't have been able to establish the position of the successor so quickly. Because he had confidence in himself and most of the leaders of Yangtze, Yang Qindong did not make a sound but just watched silently. He wanted to see who else would speak out on this matter. Sure enough, After Yuan Shaoqian spoke out, there were many officials who expressed their dissatisfaction with the imperial concubine Hu Yen in private or on certain occasions. These people were all recorded one by the Long Wei led by Peng Yu, and then investigated one by one. Because he knew that there was a traitor, Yang Qindong did not use any outsiders for this matter, and only arranged for Long Wei to do it. Under such caution there was really no news, but it also let more people jump out unknowingly. Yang Qindong's sentence just now that she still needed to work hard was an indirect reminder to Yuan Shaoqian that there were some things that she still did not do enough. Of course, if the Dragon Guards hadn't investigated and found out that Yuan Shaoqian didn't want to stand up for his sister or his nephew Yang Chang, and was just expressing his opinion from the bottom of his heart, and those who followed him were mostly speaking with a matter-of-fact attitude. If they didn't have any connections, this time it wouldn't be a warning but a direct arrest. Where there were people, there was Jianghu. There were conflicts in Jianghu. Yang Qindong had long known that this was unavoidable, especially when Yangtze's plate was so big and there were so many officials, and the benefits were so great that countless people would be jealous. For their own selfish interests, it was inevitable that they would do something excessive. Chapter 16:21. But as long as these people did not cross the red line, although Yang Qindong would punish them, he would not kill them. After all, he had to give people a chance to correct their mistakes, right? But if they really stepped on the red line, for example, they wanted to rely on their own strength to connect more people and shake the position of the air, then Yang Qindong would never let them off easily. Even if this person had great merits, it could not make up for such a mistake. Yuan Shaoqian did not cross the red line, Yang Qindong just reminded him. But even so, it made Yuan Shaoqian's face change greatly, and his heart woke up. In fact, after saying these words that day he regretted it a little. Afterwards he was reprimanded by his sister Yuan Xiaoyu. This was the first time his sister was angry with him in all these years. At that time, Yuan Shaoqian did not think that he had done anything wrong. After hearing his sister's analysis, he knew that his behavior could easily lead to misunderstandings. Especially when some of the officials who had a good relationship with him also expressed their opinions afterwards, he knew that his influence was great and the consequences of his words and actions. Fortunately, Yuan Xiaoyu was really a smart woman. In her words, she was already very satisfied that the Yuan family could go from a poor family that could not even solve the problem of food and clothing to today. Big Brother, Yuan Xiaoyu's private name for Yang Qindong, had already given too much to the Yuan family. But Big Brother could give, but the Yuan family could not accept. Otherwise they would not know what was good for them. If they did not do well, they would lose everything they had now. Yuan Xiaoyu also said that Hu Yen had already done very well as the legal wife and had never had the intention to bully her sisters. Moreover, Hu Yen was Big Brother's first woman and also the woman he valued the most. No matter what she did, whether it was right or wrong, only Big Brother could say it. No one else had such authority. It could be said that Yuan Xiaoyu's love for Yang Qindong was absolutely from the bones. It was because of this that she was willing to use her life to defend Yang Qindong's dignity. If someone wanted to offend, even if it was her own brother, she would not be rude. Brother, now that I have Yang, I am already very satisfied. It is the best thing that Yang can grow up happily and healthily. Let's not casually add more burdens to him, okay? That may not be what he wants. In the face of his lovely sister's request, what else could Yuan Shaoqian say? Not to mention that he didn't have such a strong desire to support his nephew. After all, their Yuan family had just risen and lived a good life for a few days. Even if he did, he could dispel it after listening to Yi Qingyu's words. This was a private conversation between the two siblings. Yang Qindong did not know about it. Even the resourceful Long Wei could not find out about this. However, based on Yang Qindong's understanding of Yuan Xiaoyu, he still remembered the kindness in her eyes when they first met. Yang Qindong firmly believed that his Xiaoyu was not a woman who fought for power and profit. This should be her nature. There were other officials present at the dock. Yang Qindong shook hands with them one by one and chatted with them for a while. Then, a tram with wires hanging from its head drove over. Over the years, since the first battery-powered machine, battery-powered vehicles began to be used vigorously, but they could only be used to make some small vehicles such as motorcycles. However, the development of trams began to accelerate after they had the wires on the tracks. Now, a 19-seater long car could be built. It was said that a 35-seater longer car would also be trialed successfully. After getting on the tram, Yang Qindong said goodbye to everyone and went straight to the palace. He couldn't help but feel nervous. He still remembered that when he came back last time, his eldest son Yang Bo didn't dare to recognize him. From this point of view he was somewhat unfit as a father. And now Yang Qindong, who already had many children, did not grow up with his children. Thinking about whether his children would recognize him when they saw him, whether they would call him father, or whether they would simply reject him, he actually felt a little uneasy in his heart. The tram moved and finally came to the palace. Here, Hu Yan had been waiting here for a long time with a group of princesses and children. When they saw a group of black cavalry dragon guards protecting a tram in the distance, everyone couldn't help but stand up straighter. The tram stopped, and Yang Qindong was the first to step out of the tram. It only stopped for about 2 or 3 breaths of time, and his eldest daughter, Lele, trotted all the way to him. As the eldest daughter, Lele was the king of the children. She bragged more than once about how close she was to her father in front of her younger brothers and sisters. In this matter Yang Bo had some right to speak, but he thought that he was a man and shouldn't be so pretentious, so most of the time he didn't speak, which allowed Lele to be in the limelight. Now that Yang Qindong finally appeared, among the many children, the word father seemed to only appear in the mouth of others. Although their mother had taught them many times, the moment they really saw Yang Qindong, they were still a little scared and at a loss. Only Lele rushed over recklessly. Lele, who was already 14 years old, had already grown into a big girl. She had inherited the common good points of Yang Qindong and Xiaoyin, and was very beautiful. When she rushed into Yang Qindong's arms, Bugnam of Gojoseon, who had faced 30,000 cavalrymen alone on the battlefield without batting an eyelid, was moved. He quickly opened his arms and hugged Lele. Then he quickly spun a few rounds, causing Lele in his arms to laugh non-stop. Father, Lele missed you. Lying in Yang Qindong's arms, Lele didn't forget to act coquettishly. Father also missed Lele. Yang Qindong said from the bottom of his heart. Then father, is Lele pretty? Looking at Lele's expectant eyes that flickered as if they could speak, Yang Qindong laughed loudly and played along. Of course Lele is pretty. Lele is the prettiest girl in the world. Father said so. Lele is the prettiest girl in the world. Lele laughed happily. Then she didn't forget to turn around to look at her younger brothers and sisters, especially her younger sisters who seemed to be showing off something. Perhaps it was because of her bloodline, or perhaps it was because of a child's desire to compare, but Lele's performance really stimulated the other young princesses. For example, the second princess Yang Nua, 4th Madame Dong Xiangxiang's daughter, the third princess Yang Ting, 5th Madame Tuaye's daughter, and the 5th princess Yang Lin, 5th Madame Hu Yan's daughter, who was also 6 years old, immediately left their mother's arms and ran towards Yang Qindong. They seemed to want to prove themselves, to prove that they were the prettiest and cutest girls in the world. Seeing his 3 daughters running towards him, Yang Qindong quickly stopped spinning and put Lele down. But then Lele's voice rang in his ears. Father, I'm amazing, right? Look at how my younger sisters want to get close to you so quickly. Lele is so smart. Yang Qindong laughed and sighed in his heart. A 14-year-old girl already knew how to manipulate people's hearts. He had to admit that children born in the royal family matured faster than children born in ordinary families. Yang Qindong's arms were long enough, his arms were big enough, and he had enough strength. With his 3 daughters in his arms, he didn't feel pressured at all. On the contrary, the 3 girls were at ease in his arms. The mischievous Yang Qindong even dared to stretch out her small hand to grab Yang Qindong's beard. When she realized that this father she met for the first time not only wasn't angry, but also intentionally made a funny face, she giggled and then wanted to repeat her actions. If not for Hu Yan's quick reflexes, Yang Qindong's beard would have been pulled out in a short while. The madams took over their respective daughters. Next, it was time for the boys to greet each other. The first to bear the brunt was the eldest son Yang Bo. He, who was already 11 years old, appeared to be very calm. Although he also wanted to be close to his father like sister Lele, he knew that he was a boy and also the eldest son. It was not appropriate to do so. So when he saw Yang Qindong in front of him, he suppressed his excitement and stood there quietly. He bowed and said, "Child Yang Bo greets father." Yang Qindong was very satisfied with Yang Bo's calmness. Although he wanted his children to play more when they were young, since they were his children they had to bear too much pressure. It was better for them to be mature and stable earlier. And Bo, you've grown taller and stronger. Very good. Father is very pleased. With this praise Yang Bo's small eyes began to redden. Ever since he knew what it meant to be the successor, how powerful Yang Xia was, and how this position, this great responsibility, and this heavy burden fell on his shoulders, he became more hardworking than before. He woke up early and worked late every day to learn literature and martial arts. Now that he had finally received his father's approval, compared to this, all his previous efforts were worth it. Although Yang Bo was only 11 years old, he had experienced more hardships than other children his age. When he was 3 years old, he entered the preschool of the Yang Family Academy to learn how to read and do math. When he was 5 years old, he entered primary school and began a deeper level of cultural studies. When he was 8 years old, he joined the children's regiment and began basic physical training. This year, when he was 11 years old, he entered secondary school to learn more cultural knowledge. Next year, he was preparing to enter the youth regiment from the children's regiment, so he began to experience real training to deal with local security. This was what he had to face and pay as a prince. In ancient times, it was more difficult to be a prince. Some even had to train their ability to be independent when they were 3 or 4 years old. They had to stay away from their parents and live outside. Every day they had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to study. Even so, they might not be able to stand out from the other princes. This was because in the end, it still depended on talent, how much the emperor liked you and how much luck you had. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to ascend to the throne. Chapter 1622. On this point, Yang Bo was at least lucky. He was Yang Qindong's eldest son, and his mother was the first consort, Hu Yan. As long as there were no major problems, his chances of inheriting the throne were the highest. Of course, all of this was based on his talent and he had worked hard. It was precisely because he knew all of this that although it was a little bitter now, Yang Bo had never rejected it. On the contrary, he would do his best to do everything that was arranged for him. Sometimes even his mother, Hu Yan, would feel sorry for him. But she was unable to dissuade him. This was his life and he should pay the price. Therefore, to be able to become a great person, it was not as simple as luck. Most of them had really put in a lot of effort. Other than a few children with heaven-defying luck, most of the time, it depended on how much effort they put in to obtain the benefits. Yang Bo had always been working hard. He wanted to follow in his father's footsteps. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to be able to make Yang Qindong proud of him one day. In the face of such an ambitious child, Yang Qindong was of course very happy and gratified, and appropriate praise was needed. And as long as he did not overdo it and did not let the child grow arrogant, there would not be any problems. Instead, it would make the child work even harder. He patted Yang Bo's shoulder, and looked at him as if he was already an adult or a warrior. Sure enough, it made Yang Bo very excited. Just based on that pat, that kind of recognition, his years of hard work had not been in vain. After Yang Bo, it was Yang Chang's second son, Luan Xiaoyu's son, Yang Jun's third son, 3rd Madame Xiao Yushua's son, and Yang Zhao's 4th son, 7th Madame Su Maner's son. The 3 boys were the same age and there was not much difference in height. This was also the first time the 3 children had seen their father in a real sense. Before, they had only seen him in portraits, and even more impressions were formed from the discussions of others. Now that they finally saw the real person, the 3 children who were only 6 years old were more or less reserved. But under the encouragement of their mothers, they still called out timidly, "Greetings, father." "Ah, greetings." Yang Qindong laughed heartily as he squatted down. Then, he touched the faces of his 3 sons, and handed over a delicate toy water gun to the 3 boys. This was the first product of the newly established toy factory in Crimson City that was about to go offline. As Yang Xie continued to grow stronger and richer, she was no longer satisfied with the standard of living. Instead, she began to pursue more spiritual things. The demand for cosmetics for women, bicycles for men, and even more advanced electric cars and steam cars, as well as toys for boys and dolls for girls, was also increasing. Assets needed to flow in order to better stimulate the market. Only when everyone was brave enough to spend could the economy develop more smoothly and rapidly. When his subordinate sent the investigation results to Yang Qindong, he waved his brush and many more factories appeared in Crimson City. It was only because the manufacturers of dolls had yet to produce products. After all, Yang Qindong's requirements for these things were still very high. At the very least, the dolls not only had to be sturdy and good-looking, but also couldn't have any shoddy materials. That was why they had yet to produce a finished product. But one could imagine that once a finished product was produced, the princess would definitely be the first to receive it. As for Yang Bo, Yang Qindong didn't intend to give him these things to play with. He had already grown up. Yang Qindong also promised that when he reached 14 years old, which was the time when the ancients came of age, he would personally give him an exquisite handgun. For this reason, Yang Bo was also looking forward to that day. After receiving the water gun, Yang Chong and the others were all excited. If it wasn't for the presence of their father and mother, they would have already gone to play with it. At this time, Yang Qindong finally had time to greet his wives. In public, ignoring the shocked gazes of others, Yang Qindong first hugged the first consort, Hu Yen, making her blush. Next, Xiao Yin, Lady Shui, Lady Xiang, and the others hugged him one by one. Yang Qindong naturally understood the principle of worrying about the lack of equality. He had to treat everyone equally. Otherwise, if he hugged someone less, it was inevitable that others would interpret it in various ways. Who knew how big of a wave it would cause? At this moment, with Yang Qindong's status, his every move would often attract all kinds of guesses. He really had to be careful. Yang Qindong finally stepped into the palace and participated in the welcoming banquet prepared for him by the first madam, Hu Yen. For a moment, the palace became lively again, as if the incident with the 8th madam didn't happen. Yang Qindong's return caused the entire palace to become festive and lively. However, in one of the chambers in the palace, a woman was sitting on the edge of the bed with a cute girl in her arms. The woman's figure was very good, and her skin was very white. If you looked closer, you would see that she had a beautiful face. The only flaw was that her eyes were a little red and swollen. If you looked carefully, you could see 2 streaks of tears slowly flowing down from the corners of her eyes. She was the 8th Madame Junko. Although she was a princess of the Japanese Empire, there had always been a tradition in the Japanese Empire that the husband was the leader, and the husband was the sky. It was said that once a woman got married, she had to put her husband first and foremost. Junko was no exception to this. Since she married Yang Qindong, she really regarded him as the sky. Especially after Yang Qindong helped her avenge her father, mother and brother, her heart was only left with Yang Qindong. It wasn't until after she gave birth to little Yang Qindong in her arms that she found a new comfort in life when Yang Qindong wasn't around. She usually accompanied little Yang Qindong as she grew up, and then taught her what she had learned in the Japanese Empire. The rest of the time she waited for news of her king Yang Qindong, and looked forward to his return. Such a woman didn't care about anything in the world, let alone the Japanese ninjas. She didn't even know where they went. But now, the ninja first assassinated Yang Qindong, and then assassinated Master Yang Si and almost succeeded. After the incident, Junko, who had spoken for the ninja, was implicated and put under house arrest in the palace. All the personal maids were sent away, and at this moment, there were only some new maids and her precious daughter little Yang Xian who she didn't know. Even so, Junko never gave up. At this point, it had to be said that this was related to Junko's education since childhood. She was full of tenacity and believed in her innocence. She was waiting for the return of Yang Qindong. She believed that on that day her identity would be revealed. And today Yang Qindong returned. Junko also deliberately dressed up, because according to the rules she could welcome her king at the gate of the palace. No matter what, she was still the 8th wife of Bugnam of Gojoseon, and this identity hasn't been erased. When she finished preparing everything and dressed her daughter, little Yang Xian, beautifully, she suddenly received word from Hu Yen that there was no need for her to attend the welcoming ceremony, and that it would be better for her to reflect on her mistakes in her chambers. At this moment, Junko couldn't stop her tears from flowing. But she didn't resist because she knew that Hu Yen, as the legal wife, had the power in the entire palace. This sister of hers didn't express her opinion on ordinary matters, but once she did, no one could doubt her authority. With a face full of disappointment, Junko returned to the palace. Then Junko found that the way the maids looked at her changed from disrespectful to somewhat disdainful, especially the head maid sent by the higher-ups, Chui Xiu-er, who directly showed a look of disdain in her eyes. Every princess has a personal maid, such maids generally follow them for the longest time, and they are also the ones who know their hearts the best. Usually they also serve as mentors. For example, the head maid of Junko was Miko, the former spy of the CIA, who later broke into the palace of the Japanese Empire and saved Junko. Because they had gone through life and death together, Miko knew Junko very well, and some things were properly arranged, which made her very satisfied. But since the accident, Miko was also taken away and no one knew where she went. In exchange, Chui Xiu-er, the female head maid who looked good, but there was always a flash of fierceness in her eyes, which made people dislike her. It was said that she was recommended by Brother Yang. It was said that Chui Xiu-er used to be a spy of the CIA, but because of an injury, it was not so convenient for her to move around, so she asked for a job in the palace. Now, she didn't know what kind of luck she had, but she was valued by Brother Yang and became the head maid of her own palace. Perhaps it was because everyone knew that she was recommended by Brother Yang, so everyone in the palace was very respectful, so Cui Xiu felt a little bit like a servant bullying the master, and now she was giving Junko a bad attitude. If it were the side concubine of Class 1, she would have already made a scene, or at least let more people know what happened to her. But Junko didn't. Instead, she still did what she should do as if nothing had happened. The only thing was that she was not as willing to speak as before. All this was because Junko believed in Yang Qindong, believed in her king, and believed that her wise king would investigate everything clearly and give her justice. Because of this, no matter what kind of attitude Cui Xiu had towards her, she didn't say a word. She just sat by the bed holding little Yang Xian motionless. The sky gradually darkened, and the banquet in the palace was also coming to an end. Yang Qindong seemed to have drunk a little too much because he was happy. With the help of concubine Hu Yin, he went to concubine's palace. The banquet naturally ended, and the other side concubines also returned to their respective places with their maids. The palace became quiet again. Chapter 1623. It had been proven that Yang Qindong didn't send anyone to summon Junko. It was as if the eighth wife didn't exist. This made the maids who originally had hope become disappointed. Many of them began to look at Junko with a trace of contempt like Cui Xiu. People were like this. When you were in power, even a fart would be fragrant. On the contrary, when you lost power, no matter how well you did, you wouldn't hear a word of encouragement or praise. This was especially true in the harem. A concubine who lost power often lived worse than an ordinary maid. This was the reality. When the sky was completely dark, Cui Xiu left with a complacent look. It was said that fifth brother Yang was looking for her. Looking at her swaying butt and leaving with a complacent look after carefully dressing up, many maids couldn't help but curse her in their hearts, but on the surface, they still respectfully watched her leave. When the foreman was gone, the maids' hearts were scattered. In addition, a few kind-hearted maids came to greet Junko and asked if she needed them to help make the bed. After being refused, the huge palace quickly quieted down. In the night, a breeze blew from time to time, blowing the red candles and shaking them constantly. In the shadow of the red candles, Junko sat there holding little Yang Xian who had fallen asleep. Her eyes were empty and powerless. At this moment, Junko was very unwilling. She couldn't understand why Yang Qindong didn't care about her. She had to admit that when Yang Qindong married her, it had a certain relationship with the political situation of the Japanese Empire. For example, after Yang Qindong became the son-in-law of the royal family, it played a great role in Yang Xie's takeover of the entire Japanese Empire. But it was undeniable that Junko could also feel that Yang Qindong still had feelings for her. The two first met in the capital of Baiming, and then spent 3 years together in the Yang Family Academy, so the two had a foundation of feelings. In the beginning, there was some estrangement because they worked for different masters. But now, Neon had become a small Neon province and a member of Yang's faction. Everyone was on the same side. This kind of estrangement should also disappear. But why did Yang Qindong come back and not care about her? Did he also think that the ninja assassination had something to do with her? Junko was a woman, but now she had another identity, a mother with a daughter. Her heart only cared about Yang Qindong. She had long forgotten about restoring the original prosperity of the Japanese Empire. With the current strength of Yang Xie, if the Japanese Empire, it would be self-destruction. Moreover, over the years the population had been constantly moving out. There were probably not many Neon people left in their homeland. How could they talk about independence? This was a fact that everyone could see, so why didn't Yang Qindong see it? If he had seen it, why didn't he ask about it when he realized that she wasn't in the welcoming party or at the welcoming banquet? Or was it because he was tired of her? Or was it because he had used her? Now was the time to draw a line? Junko couldn't figure it out. The more she thought about it, the more she thought about it. The more she thought about it, the more she thought about it. Her mind was full of bits and pieces of her time with Yang Qindong. Tears unconsciously flowed down her cheeks and fell on little Yang Xian who was sleeping soundly. Hey, it's fine if you don't care about your body, but why do you have to drop your tears on Xian? Aren't you afraid of waking her up? Let me tell you, children need to get enough sleep so they can grow more cute and beautiful. A voice suddenly sounded beside her, but Junko, who was in her own world, didn't seem to notice it. She thought that she was hallucinating, because she could hear that it was the voice of the king that she had been thinking about day and night. Haha. After a bitter laugh, Junko muttered to herself, "Even the king doesn't care about me, why should I care about myself?" Nonsense, who said that this king doesn't care about you? The voice rang in her ears again, but this time, it was so clear and real that Junko couldn't help but turn around. Then she saw Yang Qindong standing beside her, full of energy and vigor. If it was only Yang Qindong who appeared, Junko might have thought that it was because she missed him. But when she saw that in addition to Yang Qindong, even consort Hu Yen was standing beside him, she knew that this was definitely not an illusion. My king. Junko woke up and was about to stand up and salute. No need, don't wake little Shen'er up. Yang Qindong was already prepared, so he reached out his right hand and gently pressed down on her. After feeling the warmth from his big hand, Junko felt that it was real. At that moment she couldn't stop her tears from rushing out. The king finally came to see her. You guys talk first, I'll take little Shen'er away first. Hu Yen, who was standing on the side, showed a very kind look, then reached out and gently took Yang Shen, then turned and went to the bedroom where little Yang Shen was resting. Just outside the bedroom, Hu Yan's head maid, little Qing, was standing outside with some other maids, looking around vigilantly. Although they didn't know why the king and consort wanted to visit the 8th madam's bedroom in the middle of the night, they knew that what happened tonight couldn't be known to outsiders. Otherwise there wouldn't be Long Wei hiding in the dark outside the bedroom. Fortunately, the 8th madam had lost her power, so all the maids had gone to rest, and no one was waiting in front of her. As long as some ecstasy powder was blown into the room of these maids, they would be able to sleep until dawn, which saved a lot of trouble. On the side of the bed, Yang Qindong was hugging Junko, and the two were sitting quietly. After gradually adapting to the temperature of Yang Qindong's body, Junko knew that she had to say something, otherwise she was really worried that if she didn't say something, there would be no chance for her to say it. King, about ninja? Well, don't say it, I already know, this matter can't have anything to do with you, this king has already known it. But now I still need your cooperation, I will leave before dawn, and then everything will be the same as yesterday. You also need to calm down for a while, are you willing to cooperate with me? By the way, Tomiko and the others are living very well, they are now in a very safe place, you can rest assured. After this matter they will come back and serve you again. The amount of information in these words was a bit too much. Junko didn't understand it for a while. But no matter what, she was still the princess of the royal family. After a while she digested most of it. Although Junko didn't know what was going on, she knew that this was a trap and she was the bait. Thinking that she could do something for Yang Qindong no matter how big the training was, it was not a big deal. Junko immediately said, King, please rest assured, Junko has no complaints and will cooperate well. Haha, Junko is the girl who has the best view of the overall situation. Well, it's already late, can we rest? Yang Hodong first praised with a smile, then said with a hint of temptation in his voice. Yang Qindong knew that if he didn't do something, he wouldn't be able to completely eliminate the estrangement in Junko's heart. So he decided to sleep with Junko. Hearing this, Junko's eyes were full of affection and her face was red. She wanted to say, didn't King just come out from the madam's place? But thinking of Yang Qindong's strong body, she didn't say anything but just nodded shyly. Ah. With laughter, Yang Qindong and Junko slowly fell down. Then the gauze was slowly put down. What a garden full of spring, 12,000 words are omitted here. In a courtyard with 4 entrances outside the palace. The sky slowly brightened. The servant Yang Wu put on his clothes and walked into the courtyard. After practicing a set of martial arts, Cui Xiu came out of the room. Her face was flushed and it was obvious that she was full. She was holding a basin of warm water in front of Yang Wu. Brother Wu, you must be sweating, come wash your face. Looking at the towel handed by Cui Xiu, Yang Wu smiled, then pinched her flushed face and took the towel and began to wipe his face. While Yang Wu was wiping his face, Cui Xiu asked casually, Brother Wu, the 6th young master is back, should I continue to work at the madam's place? Suddenly putting down the towel, Yang Wu's face was a little cold. Xiu, I'll warn you again, you can only be called king, you can't even call him king. How can you call him the 6th young master? In the entire Yangxie, except for a few servants who can call Yang Qindong young master, those who are closer to him can call him the 6th young master, and those who are farther away can call him king, but most people have to call him king. This is the rule, no one can question or break the rule. Yang Wu's face changed and Cui Xiu was also shocked. Then she whispered, yes, Xiu overstepped. Seeing that Cui Xiu's attitude was good, Yang Wu decided to let her go. Then he said, the young master is back, but he didn't go to see the 8th madam, so you should do what you should do. But remember, master and servant, no matter whether the 8th madam is guilty or not, only the young master can make the decision. As servants, we can't do anything that goes against the master, otherwise the consequences will be very serious, understand? Yes, Xiao understands. Cui Xiao quickly agreed. Well, it's getting late, you should go back to the palace. Although our relationship is here and others won't say anything publicly, we still have to be self-disciplined. Chapter 1624. Yes, I'll go back to the palace now. Cui Xiao quickly bowed and then stepped out of the small courtyard. After leaving the small courtyard, she suddenly looked back and said in her heart, when you were sleeping with me you were so anxious. Now that you're done you want me to go back and serve others. Yangwu, you're just like this. Just wait until my master is promoted. At that time, I will definitely trample you under my feet and see your face. With a trace of anger, Cui Xiao returned to the palace and went to the 8th madam's bedroom. Along the way, the maids who saw her hurriedly saluted, which made her involuntarily raise her head. No matter what, she was half the master here, which gave her a sense of superiority. Until she walked into the bedroom, she saw Junko sitting in front of the mirror and dressing up. In particular, she noticed that Junko's mental state was very good, and she seemed to have a smile on her face. This made Cui Xiao even more puzzled. She could only snort and turn around to find a room to catch up on her sleep. Here Cui Xiao was half the master. No one could control what she wanted to do. What Cui Xiao didn't know was that as soon as she left, Yang Lu came to Yang Wu's small courtyard. As Yang Qindong's servants, after the young master returned, they had to go together to greet him and wait for orders. There were only 5 of them in the Yang family. Even if Tiger's mane was included, there were only 6 people. It was because they were talented that they showed their noble status. But this kind of nobility was only in front of others. In front of Yang Qindong they were still servants. You're here, then let's go. Yang Wu saw Yang Lu appear and smiled. Let's go, 5th brother. Yang Lu also smiled. But what he didn't notice was the forced and painful smile in Yang Wu's eyes. As the guard of Crimson City, Yang Wu naturally had his strengths to be chosen here. Although no one said anything, he had a bad feeling about this. Yang Qindong woke up early in the morning and had breakfast in Hu Yan's princess consort's palace. He even held little Yang Lin and fed her a few mouthfuls of food before leaving with a satisfied laugh. When he saw that Beta Persei, Yang Wu and Yang Lu were already standing in the courtyard waiting for him, he waved his hand. Let's go to the city lord's mansion. The so-called city lord's mansion had already become a 9-story building. However, the real office space was only on the bottom 8 floors. The 9th floor was reserved for Yang Qindong. This was what the ancients called the 9 and 5 supremes. Not everyone could use the 9th floor. Outside the city lord's mansion, Yu Qian, who had already received the news, was waiting here with Luan Shaoqian and the others. Each of them had a look of anticipation on their faces. Because according to the past habit, every time the 6th young master appeared here, he would give very important pointers. Often, after these pointers became reality, the strength of the entire Yangxia would unknowingly rise to a new level. Everyone was waiting for Yang Qindong to appear and for his new instructions. This time, Yang Qindong did indeed have new instructions, and that was to establish a cabinet. Yangxia was getting stronger and stronger, his territory was getting bigger and bigger, and there were more and more things to do. It was already insufficient to rely on the city lord's mansion to solve all the problems, so the cabinet came into being. They would help share some of the important things and make important decisions. Unlike the cabinet system of the Great Ming Dynasty, Yangxia's cabinet had a total of 9 people. Usually, everyone was in charge of something. Once there was a problem that could not be solved, the 9 people would vote according to the principle of the minority obeying the majority to make the final decision. If there was an abstention vote and the result was an equal vote, then Yang Qindong would make the decision. Most of the time, Yang Qindong would not interfere too much with the cabinet's affairs. In order to avoid a situation where the cabinet had too much control, the management of the military was not within the scope of internal discussion. The military was independent and even the logistics were the same. This was the only way to ensure that even if the cabinet was controlled by someone else in the future, the military would still be in the hands of the royal family. This would ensure that the royal family could turn the situation around, and it would be as easy as flipping a hand. Yang Qindong sat in the large conference room of the city lord's mansion. When he announced this decision face to face, the officials below were silent. Many of them showed excitement in their eyes. In fact, this was understandable. When Yang Qindong was not there, the final decision of Yang Xie's affairs was in the hands of the city lord's mansion, which was equivalent to being in the hands of the city lord. Yu Qian was worthy of being the boss. However, because this person was wholeheartedly impartial and never showed favoritism, there were many things that people wanted to intervene in, but they could not have the right to speak. Now the cabinet system was implemented, which was equivalent to decentralizing the power in Yu Qian's hands. So, they had more opportunities to intervene in government affairs. Of course, everyone was happy. Now, these people were thinking about who would be the first batch of people to enter the cabinet. Naturally, the low-ranking people did not think much about it, but they hoped that the officials they were familiar with could enter the cabinet. This was equivalent to having a strong backer. Among the people present, the one who was most disappointed was Luan Xiaoqun. As the first deputy city lord, he was going to take over from city lord Yu Qian, but now that the cabinet system was introduced, his power would be greatly dispersed. For a moment, Luan Xiaoqun couldn't help but think of his private statement on the matter of the 8th madam. Was it because of this that it provoked the dissatisfaction of the 6th young master, so the cabinet system was introduced? This was Luan Xiaoqun's thinking too much. Yang Qindong had thought about the cabinet system for a long time. He was using the political system of later generations as a reference. And now he thought that the time was ripe to establish a cabinet. As for the previous system of the city lord's mansion, it was because Yu Qian was the city lord. Yang Qindong was very assured of this person's ability and integrity. But now it was different. Yu Qian was old and could not do everything by himself. Wan Xiaoli was too young and could be easily used by people with ulterior motives. Now was the time to introduce the cabinet system. Not only that, the appearance of the cabinet system was also a great advantage for the next conquest of the North and South Ming dynasty. It was because of this that today's meeting was held. Not to mention that Luan Xiaoqun was a little disappointed. Yu Qian, on the other hand, was indifferent. Yu Qian was a person with a high evaluation in history. There was a natural reason for that. This was a person who truly cared about the people. In his opinion, as long as the people lived a prosperous life, it was the top priority. As for whether he would offend anyone in the process, it was not a problem that he needed to consider. Now, the emergence of the cabinet system represented a more mature sign of Yang Xie. How could he refuse? Not to mention that he also knew that he was old and could not stay in the position of the city lord's mansion for long, so naturally, there was no sense of loss. Then again, no matter what the people below thought, this matter was decided by Yang Qindong, so it was useless for others to doubt it. This was not a democratic era, but a period of imperial power. As the king and founder of the Yang faction, as long as Yang Qindong decided on something, the others would have to obey his orders. Well, next I will announce the first batch of people to join the cabinet. Seeing that the discussion below gradually became quiet, Yang Qindong reached out and took a piece of paper with a list of names recorded on it. In an instant, the meeting became quiet. At this moment, it was most appropriate to describe it as a pin-drop silence. In the quiet big conference room, only Yang Qindong's unusually calm voice sounded. Cabinet Leader Yu Qian. The first name was read out, but it did not cause any waves because everyone thought that this was a normal thing. Next, Yang Qindong paused and continued to read, Luan Xiaoqun. Luan Xiaoqun, who was sitting there and still a little nervous, couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief after hearing his name. He was really a little nervous because he was worried that his previous actions had caused the dissatisfaction of the 6th young master. If so, even if he was not a cabinet member, it was normal. If that was the case, it meant that he was completely removed from the ranks of the high-level cadres. The appearance of Luan Xiaoqun's name did not cause any surprise. After all, everyone could see it. Bugnam of Gojoseon has been deliberately training his brother-in-law. In addition, he was the first deputy city lord, the first person after Yu Qian. It was normal for him to appear on the list. After Luan Xiaoqun, Yang Qindong opened his mouth and read out the third name. Shenyu. As soon as this name came out, it was no longer quiet. There were more or less whispers and discussions. Shenyu, chief of the supervision department. In the many years since he took office, he has made contributions, but they were not very big. The main thing was that he had enough qualifications. This person joined the Yang Xie with Yu Qian. It has been more than 10 years. It was precisely because of his seniority that although the people below had some discussions, no one would say anything more. On the contrary, Shenyu himself was very excited at this moment. After his name was called, he got up and walked straight to the rostrum like Yu Qian and Luan Xiaoqun. Shenyu's age was not young. He was only 3 years younger than Yu Qian. But who says that you don't have ambition when you're old? It was good to be able to exert their remaining energy. Presumably, it was not only Xinyu who thought this way. Many old chiefs of various departments would also think this way. Even in the present day, this kind of thinking was still mainstream. After Xinyu, Yang Qindong called out Wu Qian's name. Wu Qian, chief of the anti-corruption department. His name and his name could be said to complement each other. Wu Qian really had no money. Moreover, this person was impartial, as if Bao Gong had been reborn. For the sake of his work, he even sent his wife and assistant to prison. Such a person was like an insurmountable mountain to those officials who had ulterior motives. His addition to the cabinet also made many people's hearts ache. With this point, they had to put away any ulterior motives they had before. Chapter 1625. Wu Qian, whose name was called, didn't have any excitement. He stood up indifferently. As far as he was concerned, whether he joined the cabinet or not, he would still continue to work. It was just that joining the cabinet meant that Yang Qindong trusted him more, which made him a little excited. Just like Yu Qian, the longer he followed Yang Qindong, the more he saw Yang Xie's rapid changes, and the more he was influenced by Yang Qindong's personality. To be recognized by someone he admired was a happy thing no matter how he looked at it. After Wu Qian, Yang Qindong called the fifth name, Long Tainan. This time the discussion below was even louder and it couldn't be hidden. Long Tainan was just the chief of public security. To put it bluntly, he was just a person who maintained social security. How could he join the cabinet? In terms of qualifications, he was very shallow. Even when he was qualified to be the chief of public security, many people were skeptical. But now he actually became the first batch of members to join the cabinet. This greatly exceeded everyone's expectations. But then everyone remembered that Long Tianan's wife was Bugnam of Gojoseon's seventh sister, and he had nepotism. For a time, everyone was relieved. Some people even thought that if Long Tainan could enter the cabinet with his qualifications, did that mean that they also had a chance? For a time, many chiefs of other departments, even the chiefs of important departments, had a look of expectation on their faces. They hoped that the next person to be called would be them. Long Tainan stood up. At this moment he also had a look of disbelief. It wasn't until he saw Yang Qindong gently nod to him that he knew that everything was true. He immediately took out the style of a soldier and strode straight to the rostrum. In the end, even under the influence of Yang Qindong, Yang Xie had nothing to do with the Great Ming in many aspects. But Yang Xie's development time was still too short, and it was inevitable that he would be influenced by Confucianism. In that era where culture was emphasized, it was really something that many people didn't even dare to imagine that a martial artist like Long Tainan would enter the cabinet. If it wasn't for Yang Qindong's words, even if it was announced by City Lord Yu Qian, his subordinates would have objected loudly. It could be said that it was Yang Qindong who had used his influence to decide this matter. After all, without Yang Qindong there wouldn't be Yang Xie today. Without the 5-star army, there wouldn't be such a beautiful life. After reading 5 names in a row, Yang Qindong put down the paper in his hand. Then he glanced at the participants. For a moment, those who were under his gaze couldn't help but straighten their bodies. It was as if they were saying, "Pay attention to me, I'm also very capable." But unfortunately, after looking around, Yang Qindong said, "For the time being, there are only 5 people in the cabinet. As for the other 4, I still need to consider it. But as long as you have the ability, you will have such an opportunity. Not only that, even if the officials of the Great Ming Dynasty are interested, they will also have such an opportunity." What? This sentence was like throwing a large stone into a calm pool, instantly causing everyone to exclaim in surprise. The officials of the Great Ming Dynasty can also enter the cabinet? Doesn't this mean that the competition is too strong? Yang Qindong saw this reaction and he was happy. This was the result he wanted. He believed that it wouldn't take long for this matter to spread to the imperial court of the Great Ming Dynasty, and it would definitely cause a lot of waves. This was the reason why he built the cabinet at this time. It was to dig a big hole for the Great Ming Dynasty. As long as there were empty seats, he wouldn't have to worry about no one jumping into it. Quiet down. Seeing that everyone was discussing for a while, Yang Qindong reached out and pressed down. Suddenly there was silence. It's still the same sentence. As long as everyone has the ability, you don't have to worry about not being discovered. Everyone will have a chance to enter the cabinet because the members of the cabinet will change every 3 to 5 years if there are no major accidents. There will be newcomers and there will also be people who leave. 3 to 5 years. This was what Yang Qindong decided after thinking for a long time. If it wasn't fixed, it would only show how terrifying the authority of the king was. This way he wouldn't have to worry about the people below fighting for power or playing tricks with him. In fact, if one looked carefully at the 5 people who were chosen, there were a lot of things to pay attention to. Needless to say, if Yu Qian didn't enter the cabinet, the others wouldn't have the qualifications to enter the cabinet. Letting him become the head of the cabinet was also a kind of affirmation of his previous work. When he was old, he would naturally retire. At that time, it would be the time for his son to take over the position. The son would inherit the father's business and have 2 cabinet elders. This was enough glory. There were also Xinyu and Wu Qian. One was the chief of the Ministry of Supervision and the other was the chief of the Ministry of Anti-Corruption. This was enough to show the importance that Yang Qindong attached to the supervision of officials. Presumably, if these 2 people joined the cabinet who would dare to interfere, they would definitely be severely punished. Moreover, because Yu Qian and Xinyu were officials from the Great Ming Dynasty, not only were they used for more than 10 years, but they also entered the cabinet. With this, it was equivalent to giving the other officials of the Great Ming Dynasty a lesson. Once the 5-star army arrived at the city gates, they would know what to do. As for the last 2, Luan Shaoqian and Long Tainan, one was his uncle and the other was his brother-in-law. They were equivalent to family. When they were there, when the cabinet made decisions, it would definitely be based on Yang Qindong's will. At least, it would not be out of control. In particular, when Long Tainan entered the cabinet, it also proved that Yang Xie's focus was beginning to lean towards the side of local law and order. With the continuous creation of new areas, how to manage them became the most important thing. The above were Yang Qindong's considerations. All aspects could be considered to have been taken care of. After the meeting, except for the 5 members of the cabinet, everyone else left. After there were no outsiders, Yang Qindong first congratulated the 5 people one by one. Then he said, 5 cabinet elders, now that Yang Xie is growing stronger, the pressure and responsibility on you is also increasing. Not only do you have to take care of the things in your hands, but you also need to look further. For example, the South Ming Baiming, and the West where the Navy is fighting. Since you are now cabinet elders, the power in your hands is many times greater than before. Every time you make a decision you have to be very careful. You have to consider all kinds of problems and things. Not to say that you can't make any mistakes, but you have to strive for perfection. Yes. Including Yu Qian, the 5 of them all respectfully replied, yes. Good, since everyone is now cabinet elders, then I still have to give you more responsibilities on top of your original work. For the public, now that the conquest of the Great Ming has begun, it would be best if we can peacefully accept it. For the public, the Great Ming is also a place where people know each other. This matter will require you and Xingong to worry about. If there are old friends who contact you, use them if you can. If you can't, you can also appease them. Not long after, perhaps the South Ming will send a delegation to Chichen City to study. At that time I will have to trouble the 2 cabinet elders. Yu Qian and Xinyu went to receive the officials of the Great Ming. This was the most appropriate thing to do. With them as an example, the officials of the Great Ming would know what to choose in their hearts. Yes, my king. Yu Qian and Xinyu agreed without hesitation. This was originally something that they should do. Yang Qindong nodded in satisfaction. Then he turned his gaze to Wu Qian and said, Wu Qian, Yang Xie's territory is getting bigger and bigger, and the officials needed are also getting bigger and bigger. When there are more people, it is inevitable that there will be all kinds of people. In terms of personal integrity, I still need Wu Qian to help me check. This king will still say the same thing. If something happens, investigate it. No matter who they are, who their backer is, or how big their background is, as long as they violate the law, just do whatever you want. There is also the issue of the official's property. Whoever doesn't cooperate will no longer be an official. If you want to make a name for yourself, you want to reap benefits, and you want to have power, all the good things in the world can be yours. Good, this official will remember the king's words. Wu Qian revealed a rare smile. He also felt that the pace of Yang Xie's expansion was a bit fast, and there were already signs of problems among the officials. He was thinking about whether he should make a heavy hand to clean up the officials. Now Yang Qindong gave him an imperial sword. Especially when the property disclosure policy came out, if someone's family had more money than their original income, it would be clear at a glance. If they couldn't clearly state the source of the property, it would be easier to deal with it. So, in addition to his identity as a cabinet elder, there shouldn't be any big problems when it comes to work. Cabinet Elder Long, the problem of public security is the fundamental problem of a country. As long as the country is well governed, the people can put all their energy into building the country. Therefore, the public security headquarters should not only increase the intensity of patrolling, but also send outstanding cadres to some of the new Yangtze's territories to do in-depth ideological work with the people. Let them check each other and expose the people who have problems. They should strive to strangle the crimes in the cradle so that the losses can be reduced. Also, there are bandits and anti-Yangtze forces in some places. Don't be polite to these people. Contact the local garrison and make a thorough plan to eliminate them in one fell swoop. Don't be soft-hearted. Understood, sixth young master, please rest assured. Long Tainan put down the pen in his hand, stood up, and straightened his body. Finally, it was Luan Xiaoqin's turn. Yang Qindong handed over the work of propaganda and education to him. Remember, propaganda is very important, especially in an era where people follow the herd. If this work is done well, it can make the society more stable and the people more motivated. Otherwise, there will be a lot of chaos. There is also the issue of education. You must build more schools, and the Han people must learn to read. Let them know what is loyalty and what is treachery, and better distinguish between right and wrong. Write a report on how much money you need later. Okay, sixth young master, I will go back and have a good talk with the people from the publicity department and the education department. I will definitely do this well. Luan Xiaoqin also quickly expressed his attitude. Luan Xiaoqin was also very satisfied with managing these two major tasks. This proved that his words still had a lot of weight and Yang Qindong still thought highly of him. When it came to work, he didn't have any worries. Brothers, Longzi's new book, Duke Ferocious, is already a little fat, you can go and slaughter it. New book, Duke Ferocious, please recommend bookmark, click. During the new book period, please support Longzi, thanks. Chapter 1626. With the establishment of a cabinet and the appointment of 5 elders, the news quickly spread throughout the streets of Chichen City. After Yang Qindong listened to some work reports in the city lord's mansion, he left and returned to the palace. Because of Yang Qindong's return to the palace, Yang Lu had some free time and returned to his residence in Chichen City. The moment he entered the residence, the housekeeper Yang Ying welcomed him. Master, you've had a hard day. It's all right. Yang Lu forced a smile and said darkly, if there's anything, let's talk in the secret room. Very quickly, Yang Lu sat on a familiar chair in the secret room, drinking tea and listening to Yang Ying's report. Master, old Yuan has sent a message. He said that we are going to check his accounts. He is very nervous and asked when we will take action. I'm afraid he won't be able to hold on for long. After Yang Lu sat down, Yang Ying told him the news he had just received. He has the guts to take the money but doesn't have the guts to face the questioning? He's really a piece of trash. I shouldn't have worked with him. Yang Lu said. Yang Ying also nodded in agreement, but he still continued, it's just that old Yuan knows too much, he can't get off the ship now. He also said. What did he say? Yang Lu asked unhappily. He also said that he has evidence of us. If we don't save him, we'll just die together. Yang Ying thought for a while and gritted his teeth. How dare he? As if someone had stepped on his tail, Yang Lu jumped up all of a sudden. He never thought that there would be a day when he would be threatened. Then send someone to kill him. But if he really has evidence, he must have a backup plan. If he dies, I'm afraid our matter will be exposed. Yang Ying replied worriedly. Yang Lu's originally annoyed expression immediately disappeared. That's right, how could someone like old Yuan not have a backup plan? If he really wanted to have a falling out, the other party would definitely die, and he probably wouldn't be able to escape. After pondering for a moment, Yang Lu sighed and said, then let's keep him alive for now. Send someone to tell White Fox to keep this Yuan guy in check. It won't be too late to deal with him after the dust has settled on our side. The White Fox that Yang Lu was talking about was the CIA's director in charge of the southern Ming area. As mentioned before, the CIA was organized by Yang Qindong's 7th wife, Su Mana. At first he just wanted to give it a try. After all the information came from the Security Bureau. Not only could there be problems, but it was also incomplete. Since ancient times, the way of checks and balances had always been one of the methods that the Wuxia emperors had been most willing to use. As such, the CIA took advantage of the situation to rise. Moreover, because of the creator, Su Maner, the management of the CIA was dominated by women. This was to distinguish them from the Security Bureau and also to fill in the gaps. After all, most of the time, women's hearts were more meticulous, and they would do things more comprehensively. Because of this, Yang Xie's sources of information had always been very accurate. The final judgment would only be made after the final report from the Comprehensive Security Bureau and the CIA. For example, when Yang Lu was sent to Southern Ming to manage the intelligence work of the Security Bureau, he naturally couldn't avoid dealing with White Fox. The ambitious Yang Lu's first thought was to get rid of the White Fox, and it was not difficult to do so. The CIA was only good at gathering information, but in terms of hands-on ability, or in other words, operational strength, they were far from the CIA. But then, Yang Lu considered that even if he killed White Fox, the CIA would send more people. Perhaps Black Fox and Flower Fox would be involved as well. In the end, he gave up on the idea of killing White Fox and changed it to temptation. To be more specific, it was temptation. Yang Lu used himself as bait and put on a posture of pursuing White Fox. It didn't take long for him to successfully turn her into one of his own. Who was Yang Lu? He was one of the 5 servants around Yang Qindong. His hidden power was so great that few people in Yangxia could compare. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that as long as these family retainers didn't commit a crime of rebellion, even if they made a mistake, their lives wouldn't be in danger. This was because the other family retainers wouldn't watch their good brothers get killed. In other words, Yang Lu was a big tree. Once you relied on him, it was equivalent to having no worries for the rest of your life. White Fox was a woman and she would grow old. Now she was in a high position, but one day she would retire because of age. There had to be a place for her to go. Yang Lu was undoubtedly the best backer and candidate in her eyes, and the two could be said to hit it off. After sleeping with White Fox, Yang Lu revealed his ambition little by little. At first it scared White Fox, but she was already on the boat and now she couldn't get off. Moreover, God knew if Yang Lu would be in trouble if she exposed the matter. But one thing was for sure, and that was that she would definitely be in trouble. She couldn't compare to Yang Lu's brothers who had gone through life and death to plead for him. In the end, White Fox also became one of Yang Lu's subordinates. After the Security Bureau and the CIA were under his control, Yang Lu didn't have any scruples when doing things in Southern Ming. Soon he colluded with the local tycoon Yuan Qian, who was the old Yuan they just mentioned, and started a smuggling business. The goods produced by Yang Xie every year were extremely popular. Many merchants hated that they received too little, or else they would have earned more. Yuan Qian was one of them. Among the merchants, Yuan Qian wasn't the most powerful, but he was sufficiently obedient. He became Yang Lu's spokesperson. With Yang Lu's name, it was naturally not a problem for him to obtain more goods from Crimson City. As such, the Yuan clan stood out from the crowd of merchants, and he would only receive 10% of the profits. The remaining 90% would go to Yang Lu. Again, Yang Lu's plan was huge. He needed a lot of money and he needed to bribe a lot of people to do things for him. Slowly, he took away 5% of Yuan Qian's profits, leaving him with only 5% of the profits. Logically speaking, this wasn't a small amount. However, the problem was that everyone knew that Yuan Qian had connections, and many poor relatives came knocking on his door. In order to not lose face in front of others, Yuan Qian could only puff himself up at his own cost. Slowly, many officials in Southern Ming had their eyes on him, and the amount they wanted was not a small amount. Yuan Qian finally couldn't take it anymore. Thinking of the things he had done for Yang Lu, he demanded an exorbitant price. Not only did he want back the 5% that was taken away from him, he also wanted an additional 10%, which was a total of 20% of the profits. How could Yang Lu agree to this? The conflict between the two sides started to appear, and this was what Yang Ying reported. Yang Lu was quite relieved to leave the matter to White Fox. Not only did this woman have good looks, but she was also very capable. Otherwise, she wouldn't have become the director of the CIA in Southern Ming. He was just a small merchant and he was confident that he could control him. Yang Lu also knew that there was a problem and he couldn't avoid it forever, so he had to hurry up. He couldn't help but look at Yang Ying and said, "Go to 4th Master Yang Yang's place and tell him this." Yang Lu returned to Crimson City and started to get busy. Establishing the cabinet was just one of the countless things he had to do. Next, he went to the People's Hero Monument and brought the 5 cabinet members to pay their respects. This was also the first time the 5 cabinet members made a public appearance, and it was to tell everyone that the cabinet was important and had great power. Next, Yang Qindong started to patrol the factories one by one. In terms of professional ability, Yang Qindong naturally couldn't compare to professionals. However, he had foresight and knowledge that exceeded this world by a few hundred years. Therefore, he either didn't speak, or he could often add the finishing touch, making people feel enlightened. Crimson City was huge and there were many factories. If Yang Qindong wanted to visit all the large factories and departments, it would take a few months. During this time, the negotiations between Yang Xie and Southern Ming finally came to a conclusion. Facing the covetous eyes of the five-star army, Southern Ming, who wasn't prepared, finally chose to compromise. After Ma Dali and Xie Chong quarreled and argued, all the way until the 10th month of 1467. After more than 3 months of negotiations, Southern Ming finally made a lot of concessions. For example, they allowed Yang Xie to open a bank in Southern Ming, open a shop, and allow him to build a port in Fuzhou and other places near the sea. Ma Dali also represented Bugnam of Gojoseon and said that Yang Xie and Southern Ming would continue to be friends for generations. In the future, Yang Xie would continue to provide food to Southern Ming, and the price wouldn't increase by 50%, but only by 20%, etc. Just like that, the relationship between the two sides went from being at daggers drawn to the current ambiguous relationship. This was really unexpected. After Ma Dali finished the final negotiations, he took a ship back to Crimson City and reported to Yang Qindong. In the political affairs hall of the palace, Yang Qindong said that he had worked hard and that things were done well. This made Ma Dali smile. As if he could see that Yang Qindong was in a good mood, Ma Dali took the opportunity to ask his question. Sixth young master, the current situation is that our Yang Xie is very strong, and the five-star army has recovered their fighting strength after 3 months of rest. Why do you still want to negotiate with Southern Ming? Ma Dali wasn't the only one who wanted to ask this question. Many officials were also filled with doubts. This was because according to Yang Qindong's style of doing things, he had never negotiated with other countries, regions, or powers. If there was a disagreement, he would start a war. Sometimes he didn't even need an excuse. Yang Qindong knew that it was time to answer this question. Even if he didn't give an answer today, there would still be people who would ask tomorrow. In order to solve the problem once and for all, he said, war stems from politics and politics is higher than war. Whether a war can be won or not, it can't be measured purely from a military perspective. It also needs to be combined with political factors. Chapter 1627. For example, let's attack the Southern Ming Empire. We can definitely win, but how much will we have to pay? You have to know that in the eyes of many Han people, the Great Ming Empire is still orthodox. Even if they are divided into the Northern and Southern Ming empires, it is still the same. If the people do not lose their minds, it is not wise to attack rashly. Furthermore, if we take over the Southern Ming Empire by force, not to mention what kind of resistance we will encounter, the Southern Ming Empire will not give up easily. Their destructive power is obvious. As such, if we want to recover and rebuild, we will need to invest a large amount of manpower and resources. As for these, we are not ready yet. This is also the reason why we are negotiating first. Yang Qindong answered Ma Dali's question seriously this time. This caused the other party to continuously nod his head, as if he had thought of something. Sixth young master, in other words, negotiations are only a method. In the end, we might use force? It is not a possibility, but we will definitely use force. Some people are like this. If you only show off your muscles, they will not be afraid and will think that it is just for show. As long as you place a large blade on their neck and let them feel the coldness, they will truly be afraid and lower their heads. Thus, once the Yang Xie has made all the preparations and has enough reasons to convince the world, they will make their move. Speaking to here, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with a complicated expression, but he quickly became firm again. As for the reasons needed, someone should be sending it to us soon. Ma Dali naturally did not understand the deeper meaning of Yang Qindong's words. As a qualified official, he had to know what he should know and what he should not inquire about. Otherwise, he would only bring trouble to himself. Yes, sixth young master, this official understands. That's right, before Minister Xie Chong left, he said that the Southern Ming Empire's observation team will soon arrive at Crimson City. Do you think this is a method to attack them? Of course. Yang Qindong nodded and gave an affirmative answer. This observation group will be led by your Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You must entertain them well. They are the best propaganda tool. When they return to the Southern Ming Dynasty, they will definitely bring us many unexpected surprises. Yang Qindong grew up in the 80s and 90s, and there was a very popular saying that the moon in foreign countries was rounder than in China. Just because of this slogan, who knew how many capable and talented people racked their brains to go abroad? Even if it was to wash dishes or do small jobs there, they were unwilling to return to their motherland. This time, in the eyes of many people in the Southern Ming Empire, Crimson City was a foreign country. It was believed that the saying that the moon in Crimson City was rounder than the moon in the southern Ming Empire would soon become popular. There's an old saying that goes, guarding the mouths of the people is more dangerous than guarding the rivers. As long as this observation group dared to come, Yang Qindong would let this observation group become Yang Xie's lobbyists in the southern Ming dynasty. At that time, the news would spread from 1 to 10, and from 10 to 100, and from 100 to 1,000. There would be a huge problem within the southern Ming Empire, and this would be the best support for the next attack against the southern Ming Empire. Just as Yang Qindong and Ma Dali were discussing the matter of the observation group. In the capital of the southern Ming Empire, Xie Chong had also rushed back, covered in dust. In the palace hall, Xie Chong handed up a memorial. It was the final result of the negotiations with Ma Dali. Although there were many humiliating terms in it that could be said to be humiliating, at least the 5-star army was cut off. For the southern Ming Empire, this was already considered a good result. Of course, these terms were not equal, and Zhu Qizhen was not foolish enough to make it public. That would be slapping himself and his officials' faces. Thus, after he received the memorial, he changed the topic. My beloved officials, Yang Xie has only been developing for a little more than 10 years. However, they have such powerful strength. Why is that? This time, without waiting for Zhu Qizhen to call out names, the officials below automatically stood up. The person leading them was the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhua. This person was also old and wanted to retire, but in the end he was urged to stay by Zhu Qizhen. It was not because of anything else, but because there was no one more suitable for this position in the southern Ming Empire than Wang Zhua. Money and provisions were important, and it was not reassuring to leave it to others. Wang Zhua stood up and replied, Your Majesty, this subject has always heard that Yang Xie's Crimson City's commerce and industry are very developed. It is because of this that they were able to earn a large amount of money in a very short period of time. This must be the foundation of Yang Xie's strength. That's right. Although Zhu Qizhen did not want this result, he had to admit that this result was very correct. Thus he nodded. Minister Wang's words are very true. Yang Xie's strength is greater than theirs. They have a strong foundation of money, and their financial resources are very sufficient. This is the reason why they were able to establish such a powerful army. Here comes the problem. What they can do, we can do as well. This time, Minister Xie put in a lot of effort to help us get an observation team. This emperor thinks that we should all go to Crimson City and take a look. We can learn from the enemy and subdue them. Zhu Qizhen credited the matter of the observation group to Xie Chong. In fact, it was Yang Qindong who suggested it. This was the emperor's power play. If it was Yang Qindong who invited everyone, they would only be grateful to Yang Qindong. But if Zhu Qizhen said that he fought for it, then everyone would be grateful to him. As soon as he said this, the officials below began to discuss. The officials in this era did not have many exciting lives. If they did, they would just gather together to watch singing and dancing and drink wine. As for climbing mountains and swimming, only those officials who were not successful could do that. Just like today's officials in the main hall, which one of them did not prepare for court at the 5th watch and enter court at the 6th watch. They woke up so early every day and some of them did not even have enough time to sleep, yet they still wanted to go and take a look. It was beautiful. But now, there was such an opportunity to go out and take a look. It was a trip at public expense. Previously, there was news that Yang Xie would pay for the entire observation group. This was naturally Yang Qindong's own initiative, because he still hoped that these people would become his propagandists and promote Yang Xie's power. Naturally, when Zhu Qizhen said this, it was because he wanted Minister Xie Chong to fight for it. Regardless of the reason, to be able to travel at public expense, it was said that Crimson City was very advanced, and there were many good things there, many of which could not be bought in the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. Just based on this point, who would not be willing? For a time, many officials in the imperial court were eager to give it a try. They were all thinking about signing up as soon as possible after the imperial court ended. They did not want to be unable to sign up just because the quota was full. That would be too much of a pity. Zhu Qizhen agreed in principle that everyone wanted to go to Crimson City to take a look. Firstly, he wanted to let these people see how Crimson City developed and learn from it. Even if he couldn't learn the essence of it, it would still be beneficial to imitate it and learn it. Secondly, he wanted these officials to feel a sense of urgency. Looking at the development of Crimson City and then looking at themselves, wouldn't they feel guilty? Shouldn't I work hard after coming back? Not only that, Zhu Qizhen himself also wanted to go and take a look. Of course, it was only a thought. He did not have the courage. What if he went to Crimson City and was detained? He definitely did not have Yang Qindong's strength and courage to bring 500 black cavalry and rush into southern Cloud Manor, which had tens of thousands of soldiers from 3 provinces. After the court session ended, the officials who went to the Ministry of Rights to register quickly formed a long line. This made the host, Minister Xie Chong, happy but also worried. He was happy because there were so many people going. This made him worry that no one would be interested in going and that the Southern Ming dynasty would lose face. However, he was worried because there were too many officials. Would Yang Xie agree? Sir, what should we do? Zhou Xiang came to Xie Chong's side and asked softly. Clearly, this lively scene was far beyond his expectations. How about this? Quickly go to Yang Xie's bank in the capital and see if you can contact Bugnam of Gojoseon through them. Inform them about our situation and ask them how many people they can allow in the observation group. Okay, this official will go now. Zhou Xiang did not dare to delay and ran out of the Ministry of Rights Yamen. Yang Xie's bank in the capital had existed for a long time. This bank had always been in charge of the Southern Ming dynasty's grain transfers. As the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Rights, Zhou Xiang had been here a few times and quickly found this place. He met the manager in charge and explained the situation. The manager was straightforward. He knew that this was a serious matter and hurriedly used the bank's radio station to report to the Crimson City cabinet. Fortunately, he did not have enough authority. Otherwise, he would have directly reported to Bugnam of Gojoseon Palace. Originally, Zhou Xiang thought that it would take a long time to get the news. Unexpectedly, in less than an hour, the manager came out and gave Zhou Xiang 4 big words. There is no limit. When Yang Qindong knew that there were many officials in the Southern Ming dynasty, he was overjoyed. Why would he limit the number of people? If all the Southern Ming dynasty officials came to Crimson City, he could even force them to stay. This way the Southern Ming dynasty would become an empty shell. There would be no need to fight any wars. Of course, this was just a thought. Ingzong Zhu Qizhen would not be so naive. After knowing that there was no limit, Zhou Xiang happily turned and ran. When he returned to the Ministry of Rights Yamen and reported the matter to Minister Xie Chong, he was overjoyed. This was because when Zhou Xiang was away, who knew how many people used their connections to find him and asked for a spot in the observation group. However, he did not know what Bugnam of Gojoseon's bottom line was. However, if he did not agree, he would easily offend people. How could he stand in the imperial court? Chapter 1628. Now, with just one sentence, there was no upper limit and he could explain to all parties. He immediately said to Zhou Xiang and the officials of the Ministry of Rights, "Everyone spread the news, haha." Okay, the officials of the Ministry of Rights replied happily. They were not much better than Xie Chong. After a while, except for Zhou Xiang who was not in his position, everyone else received a lot of messages. They were worried about what to do and now it was all solved. The news quickly spread, and it attracted the unanimous applause of all the officials. Zhu Qizhen also learned of the news. He thought maliciously that he should send more people to eat Yang Qindong dry. However, after thinking about it carefully, he had no choice but to set a rule. That was each department could only transfer 2/3 of their officials into the observation group. He did not want everyone to leave and there would be no one to handle the government affairs of the imperial court. As soon as this decree came out, the various departments quickly began to fight. It was all for the half of the quota. Fighting was the norm for the officials of the great Ming dynasty. Sometimes, when there were benefits, they naturally had to fight. This involved whether they could take the opportunity to develop and become stronger. When there was nothing to do, they also had to fight. They had to show their existence. In short, the great Ming dynasty's officials had many means of fighting, and it was so complicated that outsiders could not imagine. Now that there was such a good thing, there would naturally be a lot of fighting, and there would not be a result in a short time. This lasted for nearly 10 days. In the end, the winners entered the observation group, and the losers stayed in the yamen with a look of despair. The Ministry of Rights quickly received the list of the officials of the observation group from each department. When the result was calculated, it really gave Xie Chong a shock. When he saw the final result, there were more than 3,600 officials. He stood in place as if he had crashed. Xie Chong was very clear that these were the official members of the observation group. According to the result of his negotiation with Ma Dali, each official could bring 3 family members. The usual arrangement was 1 wife and 1 son and 1 daughter. In other words, on the list of 3,600 people, there were 4 times, and there were nearly 15,000 people. Xiachong couldn't help but chuckle at the thought of so many people eating and drinking. He felt that this time Yang Qindong had smashed his own foot with a stone. Zhu Qizhen also saw this name and couldn't help but chuckle. He then said to Chen Sengbao, "Tell Xiachong to do it this way." At this moment Zhu Qizhen was still thinking. This time there were already so many rank 5 officials and above in the capital. If he had known earlier he would have set the rank of officials to rank 7. That way the number of officials would at least double. This would put a lot of pressure on Yang Xie's finances. But it was just a thought. For officials with too low a rank, even if they went to Crimson City with their ability, the things they could learn would be limited. Besides, 15,000 people was already a lot. The emperor agreed, and the name list of the 15,000-strong observer group was quickly sent to Yang Qindong. At this time he was talking with Yu Qian and Xin Yu about the reception of the observer group. When he saw the final number of people, Yu Qian's face couldn't help but darken. Yu Qian was famous for being upright. Seeing the number of people in the observer group, he began to feel some heartache about the financial expenses. Even Xin Yu's face was ugly and a little red. He was embarrassed for the southern Ming officials. Did they take advantage of the situation? Did they have any shame? On the other hand, Yang Qindong didn't have the slightest displeasure. On the contrary, he was very happy as he muttered to himself, "And 15,000 people isn't a lot. I don't know what kind of influence it will have by borrowing their mouths." "King, what did you say?" Yu Qian and Xin Yu didn't hear clearly and asked curiously. "Oh, nothing. This king said that they are all children of the great Han Dynasty. We have to properly receive them. As the host we can't be stingy. Pavilion elders, you can first estimate how much silver is needed to entertain the guests." Yang Qindong waved his hand and asked indifferently. Yu Qian and Xin Yu, who had done some work in advance, had prepared 500,000 taels for this matter. This was already not a small amount. However, they didn't expect the number of people in the observer group to be so large. Just the transport ships sent out were more than 10. After all, they had to leave enough space. They couldn't make it crowded after inviting people. Wouldn't that be contrary to their original intention? That 2 million taels? Xin Yu first glanced at Yu Qian, then carefully probed with a question. However, when he saw Yang Qindong frown, he quickly changed his words. 1,500,000 taels is also fine. If it's any less, I'm afraid we won't be able to reach our initial goal. No, it's not that the difference is too big, but it's too little. Since it was us who took the initiative to invite them over, since we had the intention of letting them advertise our 5-star army, how could we be too petty? How about this? We'll give you 5 million taels as the basic cost. If it's not enough, we'll add more. In addition, we'll give you 370,000 yang coins to ensure that every official will receive 100 yang coins to buy the items they want. The yang dollar was the highest currency in the yang system. There was no other currency that could compare to it. In principle, yang xie coins weren't allowed to be exchanged. There was only one way to obtain them, and that was to receive a certain amount of money from the yang xie officials. Furthermore, those who had made great contributions to yang xie would receive additional rewards. With yang coins, one could purchase the items they wanted from the yang department store in Crimson City. The items here only accepted yang coins. In other words, without yang coins, even if you brought out a mountain of gold or silver, you wouldn't be able to buy anything from there. On the other hand, the items in the yang department store couldn't be seen from the outside. For example, there were the best cosmetics, exquisite watches, practical binoculars, high-class Chinese tunic suits and cheongsams with unique numbers printed on them, as well as high heels for women and shiny leather jackets for men. There were also exquisite palm-sized mirrors decorated with beautiful eyes, mini Buddha statues, Guanyin statues, and so on that could be hung in front of one's chest. There were even more high-end items such as flashlights and sewing machines, bicycles, electric scooters and so on. In short, they were items that didn't have high production capacity or were laborious to produce. These weren't like ordinary mirrors, glass products, soap, perfume, toothpaste and other items that could be casually exported. Instead, they were only sold in the yang department store. Many of the newly developed yang xie products were placed in the yang department store by Yes Hen. They were only waiting for people with yang coins to buy them. Once they had a certain amount of production capacity, they could be exported. Such goods would naturally be taken off the shelves. Because of this, the exchange value of yang coins was very high in the market. Often, 100 taels could be exchanged for 1 yang coin. This was why there was a price but no market. When Yu Qian and Xin Yu heard that Yang Qindong had taken out so many things at once, their eyes widened.
They knew that Yang Qindong attached great importance to this matter, but they didn't expect it to be so important that he would take out 370,000 just for Yang coins. Every southern Ming official received more than 100 Yang coins. It had to be known that even the two elders only received 100 Yang coins a month after their salary. As for the lower-level officials, they only received a few dozen Yang coins. There were even some who received a dozen Yang coins a month. This is a big deal. After a round of exclamations, even Yu Qian, who had always treated money like dirt, couldn't help but sigh. Very satisfied with the two elders' performance, Yang Qindong chuckled. If that's the case, are the two elders confident in completing the task? No problem. Yu Qian and Xin Yu stood up at the same time. At this moment, their hearts were filled with great confidence. Yang Xie had made all kinds of preparations. Under the expectations of the southern Ming officials, 10 modified tourist boats arrived at the Suzhou port not far from Nanjing. Here, nearly 15,000 southern Ming officials were waiting. According to the agreement between the two sides, the Suzhou port was being built, but there was still some time before it could be used. To get on the boat, one needed to walk over a ladder, so everyone had to be careful when getting on the boat. They were afraid that they would accidentally step on air and hurt their feet. After everyone boarded the tourist boat, the interior space was spacious and the view was excellent. In particular, one of the guest rooms was equipped with a large Simmons soft mattress, which made it extremely comfortable for people to lie on. At this moment, Wang Jiqing's butt sank into the mattress as he clicked his tongue in wonder. Before this, Wang Jiqing had already seen the world. As the eldest grandson of the Minister of Revenue Wang Zhuo, what kind of good things had he not seen since he was young? Even though he had been to the imperial palace a few times with his grandfather, when he lay on the mattress, he still felt like Granny Lu who had just entered the palace for the first time. Everyone says that Yang Xie is very rich and that the progress of society is more civilized and advanced. Could it be that this isn't just a legend? Wang Jiqing said as he lightly stroked the mattress. Bang! The door suddenly opened from the outside. Then a girl around the same age as Wang Jiqing, around 14 or 15 years old, rushed in. As soon as she entered the room, she yelled, "Brother, did you go into the bathroom? What are you doing? Don't you know that you have to knock before entering someone's room? You're already so old, yet you're still so rude." Although he was scolding her, his words were not harsh. It showed his tolerance and generosity towards the girl in front of him. The girl's name was Wang Shang. She was the granddaughter of Minister Wang Zhuo and Wang Jiqing's sister. Perhaps because they were siblings and they were too familiar with each other, Wang Shang did not take her brother's words seriously. Instead, she continued to chatter, "Brother, did you see the bathroom?" "What bathroom? What is that? Is it a person's name?" Wang Jiqing's face was filled with confusion. Chapter 1629. I knew you hadn't seen it before. Wang Shang snorted. She knew her brother very well. He was very smart and had a lot of ideas, but there was one thing about him. He was too meticulous in doing things. He had a slow personality. She thought that her brother must not have had time to go to the washroom, so she purposely came to show off. "Brother, come here. I'll tell you what the washroom is, what's here and how to use it." Wang Shang pulled Wang Jiqing's hand and led him to the side of the room. After a full 10 minutes, Wang Jiqing walked out of the washroom as if he was in a dream. After showing off, Wang Shang also left the room to find her sisters. Wang Jiqing, who was left behind, was a little confused. The items in the bathroom just now had really shocked him. For example, the expensive shampoo shower gel, the porcelain bathtub that was big enough for him to lie down in, and the toilet that could be flushed at any time. With Wang Jiqing's family background, he had experienced these things before, but they were completely different from the things here. Take the bathtub for example. There was a faucet on the side. When you turned it to the left, it was cold water. When you turned it to the right, it was hot water. It was really very convenient. It was far different from his own home, where he had to boil water in advance to take a bath. When the water turned cold, he had to ask the servants to refill it. It was just a ship that was welcoming them, but the room was already so luxurious. Wang Jiqing couldn't help but wonder what it would be like when they arrived at Yang Xie's capital, Qichen City. In fact, Wang Jiqing wasn't the only one with such thoughts. Many people in the same industry had such thoughts. They were looking forward to the rest of the journey. It would take a few more days to get from Suzhou to Qichen City. There were still things happening in Qichen City. For example, a guest was welcomed in the palace. It wasn't exactly a guest. It should be said that it was a member of the family.
He was Yang Qindong's fourth brother, Yang Yang. Among the brothers, Yang Yang was the most useless existence in Baiming. When his brothers had things to do, he became a good-for-nothing. He went to restaurants every day to walk birds, giving people the impression that he had nothing to do. In the end, Yang Yang was just born at the wrong time. He still had some ability and insight. This could be seen from the fact that he had condescended to create sixth brother early on. Sure enough, after deciding to follow Yang Qindong, Yang Yang's life changed. She held great power and became Yang Xie's spokesperson in the southern Ming dynasty. Not only did she receive the respect of countless people, she could get whatever she wanted with just a stretch of her hand. She truly lived the life of a deity. If he hadn't been assassinated by a ninja, he would still be in the southern Ming Empire and wouldn't be willing to return to Kaisan City. This was not to say that Yang Yang did not like Kuqian City. In terms of facilities, Kuqian City was much better than the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. However, since he was back here, he had to abide by the rules of the southern Ming dynasty. For Yang Yang, who was used to freedom, it was more comfortable in the southern Ming dynasty. He could do whatever he wanted. It had been a while since Yang Qindong returned to Kuqian City. During this time, the two brothers had met, but time was too tight and they only exchanged a few words. Now that Yang Qindong had done all the important things he should have done, he slowly became free. This fourth brother came to visit again and this family banquet was held. Since it was a family banquet, there naturally wouldn't be any idle people. Even the few servants of the Yang family didn't come. The only ones sitting at the table were Yang Qindong, Hu Yan and Yang Yang. Hu Yan was the princess consort. When Yang Qindong wasn't in Kuqian City, her status had always been high. Letting her sit with him expressed Yang Qindong's respect for his fourth brother. If there was no wife accompanying him, it would be a brotherly banquet. Haha, your sister-in-law didn't come. Otherwise you two would be able to talk. Yang Yang looked at Hu Yan and chuckled. Then fourth brother can send someone to bring sister-in-law over when you have time, Hu Yan replied with a smile. Alright, I'll send someone to do that. Ah, Yang Yang heartily laughed. Then he looked at Yang Qindong. He took the initiative to raise his wine glass and said with a sigh, Sixth brother, although I am your elder brother, I am convinced by what you have done. Come, let me toast you. Ah, fourth brother, please. Yang Qindong laughed heartily and toasted his brother. Although one was his fourth brother and the other was his sixth brother, the disparity in status made Yang Yang no longer dare to act like an elder brother. Over the years, Yang Qindong had proven his ability with facts. Not only did Yang Yang feel pressured when he saw Yang Qindong, he even felt restrained sometimes. Even big brother Yang Gong, second brother Yang Rang, third brother Yang Shi, and fifth brother Yang Guifang, who were far away in the capital of northern Ming, felt the same way. Once they saw the current Yang Qindong, they would also feel the pressure increase. After toasting with Yang Qindong felt a little more confident. At the very least, he didn't feel that Yang Qindong was estranged from his fourth brother. This gave him the confidence to say the words he had prepared because he truly wanted to do something and help Yang Qindong. Before he could think of a way to say it, Yang Qindong took the lead and asked, Fourth brother, are your injuries okay? Don't worry, the assassination attempt happened in the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. They must express their sincerity and compensate you personally. Because of an assassination attempt, the southern Ming dynasty had to compensate him. Only Yang Qindong had the confidence to say these words. If it was someone else, they would at most receive a few words of comfort. As for others, it was better not to think about it. It was just a daydream. Yang Yang used this as an opening and laughed. Then he patted his chest and said, Fourth brother, my body is very good. Sixth brother doesn't need to worry. As for compensation, you can decide. I have saved some money over the years, so I don't really care. But speaking of this matter, the southern Ming dynasty has contacted me in private. Oh, they contacted you in private? As if it was the first time he heard about this matter, Yang Qindong picked up a piece of cauliflower and put it in his mouth. Yang Qindong had already trained himself to not show his emotions on his face. Sometimes he would smile, but no one knew what he was thinking in his heart. Yes, they contacted me. Yang Yang didn't look at Yang Qindong's expression. Instead, he said, The person who contacted me has a big background. Big background? Then it must be a big shot. Let me guess. Yang Qindong's lips curled slightly. Some fragments of his mind couldn't help but faintly connect. Seeing that Yang Qindong wanted to guess, Yang Yang also became interested. Okay, then sixth brother can guess. Yang Qindong didn't let Yang Yang wait for long before he spat out 3 words, Manager Chow.
Yang Yang's eyes flashed with astonishment. Then he couldn't help but give a thumbs up. Fourth brother is amazing. It is indeed Chao Jixiang. He is now the manager of the Southern Ming Dynasty's Imperial Guard. Following that, Yang Yang spilled everything he knew, as well as what Chao Jixiang's men had told him. As for this Chao Jixiang, although he has a high position and power in the Southern Ming Dynasty, that is only on the surface. Right now he is not too favored by the Ying sect. Moreover, there is an additional Chen Xingbao above him. This person has gotten together with another head eunuch, Kai Zhong, and is constantly squeezing his living space. As a result, Chao Jixiang is currently in a difficult situation. Thus, he used the assassination to contact me. On the surface, it seems like he is apologizing, but in reality he is intending to rely on me and change his allegiance. Fourth brother, I can feel it. Originally, I did not want to pay attention to them, but now I feel that it is an opportunity. I think that this is a trap. Yang Qindong really wanted to say this, but he didn't. Because he needed people to enter his trap, he could only pretend that he didn't know anything. However, no one knew better than him what kind of person Chao Jixiang was in history and how much trust he had received from the Ying sect's Zhu Qizhen. Speaking of Zhu Qizhen, he trusted the people around him, especially the eunuchs who seemed to have no bottom line. In history, even though he was tricked by Wang Zhen and lost the Temu castle, after the Ying sect's restoration, he issued an edict to clear Wang Zhen's name and used incense wood to summon spirits. In the capital, he built a Jingzhong shrine in the northern courtyard of the Wisdom Temple to worship spirits. Chao Jixiang had once been under Wang Zhen's tutelage. In the eyes of the Ying sect, he was one of Wang Zhen's substitutes. In history, he had plotted with General Shi Heng and Cabinet Grand Secretary Su Yozhen to lead troops to welcome the Ying sect's restoration. His contributions were even greater, and he was rewarded with large amounts of land. He also assisted in the military affairs of the capital. Chao Jixiang's nephews, Chao Xian and Chao Duo, were appointed as hereditary commanders of the Genie Guards, and were gradually promoted to become military governors. The number of people under Chao Jixiang's command who were able to become officials numbered in the hundreds and thousands. There were many officials in the court who relied on Chao Jixiang in hopes of being promoted. Chao Jixiang had a lot of power at that time, and together with Shi Heng they were called Chao Shi. It wasn't impossible for such a person to betray the Ying sect. However, if he betrayed Zhu Qizhen and fled to the Yangxie, he was not trustworthy at all. Looking at the Bugnam of Gojoseon Palace, apart from the guards in charge of security, there were no other men. There were no eunuchs at all. It had to be said that Yang Qindong did not have a good impression of eunuchs. This was because in history many bad things happened because of them. However, Yang Qindong had interacted with eunuchs before. For example, the head eunuch Mao Mu, who was serving the empress in the southern Ming palace, was one of Yang Qindong's men. From time to time he would send important information. However, on the surface Yang Qindong did not have any eunuchs by his side. In such an environment, if Chao Jixiang wanted to join the Yangxie, what could he do? He did not have a position for himself, so why would he surrender? It was not easy for him to escape from Beiming to the southern Ming dynasty and join the Ying sect's Zhu Qizhen. Why would he betray once more? Chapter 1630. And even if all of this was true, how could Yang Qindong believe a person who could betray him at any time? Yang Qindong was familiar with the history of the Great Ming Dynasty. Even though Yang Qindong didn't seem to care much about the Great Ming Dynasty, and Chao Jixiang was also a guard of the Imperial Secret Service. He was very mysterious and came and went without a trace. However, Yang Qindong also knew this person very well. It was because of this understanding that he was very sure that this person would never betray the Southern Ming Dynasty's emperor, Zhu Qizhen, nor would he surrender like Yang Yang said. All of this was just a trap. With a plan in mind, Yang Qindong pretended that he didn't know anything and said to Yang Yang, "Fourth brother, this is a good thing. Since that's the case, you can continue to contact him. If you need help, whether it's the Security Bureau or the CIA, we will do our best to help." This was exactly what Yang Yang wanted to hear. He also wanted to make some achievements. He immediately said happily, "It just so happens that there are people sent by Chao Jixiang in the observation group. When the time comes, I will have a good chat with him." Seeing Yang Qindong's excited expression, Yang Qindong couldn't bear to dampen his enthusiasm. He also wanted to see what kind of trap the other party had set. He didn't believe that Yang Qindong would betray him. With the other party's ability, even if something happened to him, it was impossible for him to rise to the position of Yangxie. In other words,
there would only be disadvantages and no benefits. Thus, Yang Qindong also wanted to see who else was involved in this matter. Of course, even if this matter didn't happen, Yang Qindong already had a rough understanding in his heart. He only needed to wait for the other party to set up the trap. At that time he would let the person who set up the trap know what it meant to seek death. Yang Qindong was holding a family banquet in the palace. Because Yang Wu was in charge of the palace's affairs, he had been accompanying him. In a small courtyard outside the palace, Cui Xiu left the palace with the excuse of not feeling well. She came to see Yang Lu, who had been waiting for a long time. "How was it? No one noticed you when you came out, right?" After seeing Cui Xiu appear, Yang Lu sat on a chair and asked with an unpleasant expression. Over the years, Yang Lu had hardly exercised his body. Moreover, he had indulged in eating, drinking, whoring and gambling. His body was no longer as good as before. Reporting to Master, "No. The 8th madam can't wait to see me?" As soon as I said I wasn't feeling well, she immediately approved my leave. Cui Xiu put away the arrogant attitude she had in the palace. At this moment she was as docile as an obedient lamb. It couldn't be helped, the lives of Cui Xiu's parents and 2 older brothers were in the hands of Yang Lu, and if she were to offend him, her family would immediately be destroyed. What she didn't know was that her family had already been killed by Yang Lu. Speaking of which, Yang Lu didn't have the time to send a few people to keep an eye on Cui Xiu's family. Besides, it was difficult for the living to keep a secret. Only the dead were the most reassuring. "Very good, you did well." Yang Lu still had some understanding of the ways of a master. He knew that if he praised his subordinates properly, they would be full of enthusiasm. "You can rest assured that your family is now very safe. They have food and drink and they are living very well. When the matter is done, you will be given a large sum of money, and you can reunite with your family." "Thank you, Master." When she heard that she could reunite with her family, Cui Xiu's eyes flashed with yearning. The reason why she did these things was for the safety of her family. "Well, you tell me, is there anything unusual about the 8th madam?" When it came to business, Yang Lu, who was sitting on the chair, was a lot straighter. Reporting to Master, the 8th madam has completely lost power. Bugnam of Gojoseon has been back for so long, and he has not come to the 8th madam's palace. Even Princess Yang Xian has not seen her father for so long. When Cui Xiu answered this question, her tone was very firm. Perhaps adults can deceive people, but a 6-year-old child can't deceive her. This answer was the same as the result of Yang Lu's analysis. He nodded with satisfaction and said, "It seems that Bugnam of Gojoseon really regards the 8th madam as the backing behind the ninjas. This is the best, he will not suspect others because of this. But you still have to keep an eye on it. If there is any movement, tell me immediately." "Yes, Master." Cui Xiu replied respectfully. "Good. By the way, did Yang Wu find anything?" Thinking of his brother, Yang Lu's eyes had a trace of hesitation. He admitted that this time he took advantage of the feelings between brothers, but there was no other way. With the smuggling he did, once Yang Qindong found out, it would be difficult for him to survive. At that time, even if the other brothers pleaded for him, the result would not change. Over the years, Yang Lu thought that he understood Yang Qindong. This person had his own principles when doing things. Anyone who was willing to step on the line, no matter what kind of merits they had in the past, would be heavily punished. And what he did was not as simple as stepping on the line, it was simply challenging Yang Qindong's bottom line. There would definitely not be a good result. Even so, he could only give it a try. If he won, then he would reach the peak of his life. On the other hand, if he lost, he would just die. Even if he waited, he would still die. If there was still a chance, why not? As such, Yang Lu's outlook on life was completely distorted. When asked about Yang Wu, Cui Xiu replied truthfully, "This person, other than being a little lecherous, really doesn't have any other shortcomings. After observing for a while, I found that Yang Wu is not a greedy person. He never accepts gifts, and basically there is no abuse of power, so it is really difficult to threaten him." Yes, it is very difficult. Yang Lu couldn't help but sigh after listening. He had thought of dragging Yang Wu down more than once. It must be said that this person's position in Crimson City was too stable, and his influence was great. If he had his help, many things would be much smoother and he wouldn't have to be so careful today. For example, if Yang Wu was willing to cooperate with him, he could completely control the palace. Then, for the safety of his wife and child, Yang Hodong would have to bow down. Unfortunately, he couldn't find anything to use against him after searching for a long time. And if he were to say something rashly,
not only would Yang Wu not help him, he might even report him to the young master. If that was the case, all the planning would be meaningless. Although it is very difficult, we still have to try. Let's continue searching. I don't believe that he won't be greedy when he has such great power. And as long as we find him, our big plan will succeed. Yang Lu still didn't give up. I understand. Cui Xiu nodded and agreed. Then Cui Xiu left. A figure flashed in the small courtyard, and Yang Ying walked out from the darkness. Yang Ying, do you think it's possible to persuade Yang Wu to work for us? Seeing Yang Ying, Yang Lu didn't straighten his body, and instead collapsed as comfortable as possible. A look of disgust flashed across Yang Ying's eyes as he stared at Yang Lu's body that was as soft as mud. Even Yang Lu didn't know that his real identity was a secret agent of the Southern Ming Brocade Guard, and was directly under the command of the factory guard, Chao Jixiang. In the entire Southern Ming Empire's embroidered uniform guard, only Chao Jixiang knew his identity. This was the greatest way to prevent his identity from being exposed. Facts also proved that all these years, ever since he sided with Yang Lu, and became the most trusted butler step by step, no one doubted his identity. And Yang Lu could be where he was today, it was all because of his help. A young man with ambition had turned into a gluttonous, lazy and greedy person who was afraid of death. Many times Yang Ying looked down on Yang Lu. This was because if the two of them were in different positions, he would never betray his master. This was one of the 5 servants of Bugnam of Gojoseon, and his identity was extremely noble. As long as he didn't court death, he would definitely live a life of glory. However, he didn't have the ability, and yet he still wanted to achieve great things. Why didn't he take a piss and look at himself in the mirror? For someone like Yang Lu, even if he was a small 7th-ranked county official, he wouldn't be able to manage a county well. Yet he still wanted to be like Yang Qindong, a prince of the great Ming dynasty? He really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Although he looked down on him in his heart before the mission was completed, he was still very respectful on the surface. He lowered his head and said, "Master, it's too difficult to persuade Yang Wu and the risk is too great. It's better to abandon this idea for now. The Southern Ming Dynasty's observation group is about to arrive, and there's also a secret agent from the Southern Ming Brocade Guard following them. He will come in contact with Yang Yang, so we should do a good job in writing this article. Yes, we still have to use Yang Yang first. Speaking of which, this person is an idiot. He doesn't even know that he's being used, ha." Speaking of Yang Yang, Yang Lu laughed loudly. However, how could he know that in Yang Ying's eyes he was also an idiot? After the Southern Ming Dynasty's observation group was bumpy on the sea for a few days, they finally appeared outside the new pier of Crimson City. Because of Yang Qindong's importance, in order to welcome them, Yu Qian and Xin Yu did a lot of work. When they knew that the observation group was about to arrive at the new pier, 2 old officials and a group of Yangxia officials stood outside the pier to welcome them. On the new pier there were many street lamps, and the cement steps were painted with a layer of gold paint. It looked very magnificent. In front of the pier, a military band was wearing brand new military uniforms and standing in formation, playing the song, Our Great Han, adapted from our great Ming dynasty. Under the passionate rhythm, there was a group of youths wearing white and blue school uniforms standing at the side with flower garlands in their hands. They were all primary school students from the Yang Family Academy, and they were here to present flowers to the observation group. Chapter 1631. Apart from the military band and children, there were also a group of policemen in police uniforms. They were here to maintain law and order. After all, there were close to 15,000 members of the South Ming Observer Group, and their safety had to be guaranteed. Because of this, one of the elders, Chief Police Long Tainan, had also come. 3 of the 5 elders had come, which was enough to show how much importance Yang Xia placed on the South Ming Observer Group. Apart from the policemen, there were some officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as well as some commoners who had come to watch. It was not entirely accurate to say that they were commoners. Most of them were representatives chosen by their respective units to welcome the guests. They were all dressed in neat and tidy clothes, and their figures were tall and straight. The men were mostly handsome and the women were mostly beautiful. Every single one of them was full of energy, displaying the demeanor of the Han people of Crimson City. Apart from these Han people, there was also a welcoming group of 500 people. Among them there were white-skinned, black-skinned, yellow-haired, red-haired and blue-eyed people. They were all people who had been conquered by Yang Xia, and they were the ones who had performed well. Placing them here was a testament to the strength of the Yang faction and the nobility of the Han people. The welcoming group had more people than the observer group, and there were close to 20,000 of them. But even so, the plaza in front of Crimson City's new pier still didn't seem crowded. Just last year, the docks had undergone another expansion. Not to mention that there were only 30 to 40,000 people. Even if there were 100,000 people here, it would not be a problem. Everything on the pier had been seen clearly by the observer group. Seeing this scene, as a member of the observer group, they were naturally filled with pride. After all, no matter who went to a foreign place, they would want to be welcomed and not rolled their eyes. However, there were some people, mainly the South Ming officials, who maintained a smile on their faces, but their hearts were beating like drums. Why were the people welcoming them so energetic? Could these people really be ordinary people and not the nobles and gentry in the city? Thinking about the state of the South Ming people, they were not starving. Although they wouldn't starve to death, most of them were emaciated and their eyes were lifeless. They were like walking corpses. How could they be as energetic as the people who greeted them? Could it be a disguise? At this moment there were clearly many people who had such thoughts. The officials all decided to wait until they entered Crimson City to take a good look. Whether it was real or fake, they would be able to tell. The ship finally reached the shore, and the people who walked out from the first ship were the Southern Ming Empire's Minister of Personnel, Qin Sun, and the Minister of Revenue, Wang Zhuo. The fact that they were able to join the observer group was their own idea, as well as the idea of the Southern Ming Emperor, Zhu Qixin. One of them was in charge of the officials, while the other was in charge of the country's finances. This time they came with the attitude of learning. He wanted to see how Yang Xie managed to accumulate so much money and food, and how he used his men. Speaking of which, both Yu Qian and Xin Yu knew these two. Especially since Yu Qian's position in the past was basically the same as theirs. When this old friend met, he naturally went up to greet him with a smile. Seeing Yu Qian and Xin Yu walk over, whether it was Qin Sun or Wang Zhuo, their expressions were somewhat unnatural. In the past they all belonged to the great Ming dynasty, but now they all had their own masters. More importantly, Yu Qian and Xin Yu were clearly doing better. When they were on the ship, Yang Xie's people told them about the general situation in Crimson City, and they mentioned the words of the fifth cabinet elder. Thinking about it, he was already a cabinet elder, but they were still only ministers. In addition, the Southern Ming dynasty was currently in a precarious situation, while Yang Xie was at the peak of his power. The gap between the two sides would only be even greater, especially that Xin Yu. In the past he was simply a nobody in their eyes, a low-ranking official. But now he had become one of the Yang Xie's cabinet elders, and he held the power of life and death in his hands. If one studied the huge territory of Yang Xie, they would know that their real power was even greater than the king of a small country. Comparing oneself to others was indeed infuriating. Welcome, welcome. Yu Qian and Xin Yu smiled and extended their right hands to Qin Sun and Wang Zhuo. They were in other people's territory, and this time they were here to learn from them. The two ministers did not dare to be careless. They also quickly extended their right hands, and then the four of them shook hands. The etiquette of shaking hands was not in the Great Ming dynasty, but at this moment, everyone followed suit without any feeling of disharmony. It was no wonder that this etiquette was accepted by the people in the future. After Ah Sun and Wang Zhuo, the Minister of Rights Xie Chong, the Minister of Justice Xiao Chua, the Minister of Works Wei Luo, the Minister of War Kuang Yi, and the Imperial Censor Shang Lu all came down from the other ships. Both sides greeted each other and greeted each other. What a big lineup. After the Minister of War Kuang Yi got down from the ship, his expression was somewhat ugly. In his view, this was clearly Yang Xie's show of strength. Bringing so many people, if this was not a show of force, what was it? Kuang Yi was a veteran, and because he was in charge of the Ministry of War, his temper was naturally worse than the average person's. Now that the Southern Ming dynasty was about to clash with Yang Xie, one could imagine how much pressure he was under. His reaction was within everyone's expectations. Yu Qian and Xin Yu looked at each other and did not pursue the matter. Instead they chuckled. Then they said, "This is our king's wish. Whether you are willing or not, you have to abide by our rules. If not, please go back. The ship is right there, ready to leave at any time." Kuang Yi choked and wanted to turn around and leave. However, when he thought of his mission, he forced himself to endure it. He let out a cold snort and did not say anything else. The other ministers smiled awkwardly. They were not as unreasonable as Kuang Yi, so naturally they would not stand with him, nor would they turn around and leave. Seeing that no one was speaking, Yu Qian smiled and said, "Since no one has any objections, then let's follow the arrangements."
Come, bring out the flowers. As soon as his voice fell, the primary school students who had been standing there for a while came forward with garlands in their hands. When they arrived in front of the officials, they tiptoed and put the garlands in their hands around the necks of the officials. Adults were always the most tolerant towards children. Not to mention such cute primary school students. They did not want anything but to give the wreaths. Therefore this segment was completed very smoothly. After that, a row of prepared trams drove to the plaza in front of the pier. The members of the observation group entered the trams in batches. When they entered the trams, the members of the observation group all had curious expressions on their faces. Even Qin Sun, Wang Zhuo, and the other high-ranking officials were no exception. Clearly they were very curious about the things in front of them. Rows of clean seats were placed in front of them. When they sat down they felt the softness of the sponge. Then a clear glass appeared in front of them, allowing them to see everything from the inside out. When the members of the observation group entered the trams one by one, the first tram started and slowly drove out of the plaza, heading straight to Chichen City. At this moment, screams of surprise rose and fell one after another. Whether it was the people sitting in the first tram or the people in the other trams, when they saw that the trams that were not pulled by horses or pushed by people began to slowly move on the main road, they all screamed in surprise. People always had a fear of the unknown. Especially when the appearance of an object exceeded people's imagination, that feeling of fear would be even more intense. The members of the observation group screamed in surprise. No matter what rank the officials were, they all screamed inaudibly at this moment. They might be excited, surprised, or afraid from the bottom of their hearts. Fortunately, in each tram, in addition to the necessary driver, there was also a young and beautiful female soldier in Wuxia. She wore a military uniform and looked valiant and formidable. Their voices sounded in a timely manner and began to explain the principles of the trams, explaining why the trams could move on their own. Although no one could really understand the principles that these female soldiers explained, at least everyone knew that this was not the result of magic. Everything was the result of scientific progress. Finally, some of the commotion was suppressed, and the members began to curiously observe the things inside and outside the trams. Wang Zhuo's family of 4 was also in a tram that was starting to move. The tram moved slowly on the main road, and as it got closer to Chichen City, the number of tall buildings in the surroundings began to increase. What a beautiful city. It's even more beautiful than our capital. It's clean and the air is so good. Sitting in the row behind them, granddaughter Wang Shang said excitedly. That's right, it's really beautiful here. His wife, Wang Songshi, also sighed on the side. Her eyes were constantly changing with the surrounding scenery. The eldest grandson, Wang Zhiqing, who had always been calm, also pointed outside and shouted inaudibly, "Look, what's that? It's so fast, one person can fly away." Needless to say, Wang Zhiqing must have seen the bicycle on the bicycle path beside the tram. Although things like this were not widespread in the entire Chichen City, at least some people could already afford it. Therefore there was now an army of bicycles on the main road. This thing can even pull a person. That's amazing. Big brother, buy one too and pull me along, okay? Wang Shang was clearly shocked. Then her face filled with joy as she pulled Wang Zhiqing's arm with a pleading look. Alright, if we can buy it, we will definitely buy one. Wang Zhiqing also made a solemn vow. Chapter 1632. Big Brother is the best. After receiving his promise, Wang Shang's beautiful eyes turned into crescent moons as she smiled. When Minister Wang Zhuo heard all of this, his heart was filled with complex emotions. He had only just entered Crimson City, but it had already brought him too many surprises and unknowns. At this moment he didn't know if this was a good or bad thing, but after seeing his grandson and granddaughter's performance, he had a faint feeling that Crimson City was too powerful and too rich. It was precisely because of this wealth and power that he had an indescribable curiosity and attraction to young people. He really didn't know if this curiosity was a good thing or a bad thing. However, he couldn't stop this at all. In fact, it wasn't just Wang Zhuo who had such thoughts. Many of the southern Ming officials in the observation group also had the same attitude. Among them, the shallow ones only saw the shock brought by the things in front of them, while the far-sighted ones saw the changes in the people around them and began to think deeply. Minister of War Kuang Yi was also sitting in a carriage. What was different was that the people around him weren't family members, but rather 3 young generals in the southern Ming army. One of them was a Chiliarch while the other 2 were centurions. From this point alone, it could be seen that Kuang Yi was definitely a good official who wholeheartedly served the court.
Previously, Kuang Yi had a lot of dealings with Yang Qindong, and he had always fully supported Yang Qindong. That was because at that time, Yang Xie hadn't said anything. Yang Qindong's actions were also to help the southern Ming people quell the uprising. It was precisely because of this opportunity that Yang Qindong walked out of Baiming, defeated the southern Ming, and openly went to Crimson City to obtain everything he had now. However, no matter how powerful Yang Xie was in Kuang Ye's eyes, Yang Qindong was still a subject of the Great Ming. Whenever the Great Ming needed him, he should be called upon. However, all of this was just a matter of course. Why should everything he worked so hard for be unconditionally handed over to the court? If the imperial court was a court that truly cared about the people, perhaps Yang Qindong would really consider it. However, the current southern Ming dynasty was filled with officials who were greedy and greedy. In the eyes of most people, there was only a small plot of land in front of them. How many people truly cared about the livelihood of the common people? Moreover, history has already told us that the Han people studied the path of the Golden Mean. In history, other than the Han dynasty, there were very few examples of expansion. In the few wars with foreign countries they only won and then returned. There was no thought of going out at all. In this way it would be fine if they didn't encounter a powerful enemy, but if they did, what would happen to the common people? In later generations there was often a saying that the first class was a foreigner, the second class was a government official, the third class was a minor citizen, and the fourth class was a Han. At that time Yang Qindong was weak and could only watch. But now that he had this kind of ability he had to make changes. He had to conquer more territory for the Han people and let the Han people become the people at the top of the pyramid in this world. Kuang Yi naturally didn't know what Yang Qindong was thinking. Even if he knew, he probably wouldn't agree. This wasn't surprising. In the eyes of most of the great Ming officials, other than the Ming dynasty, the rest of the world was uncivilized. What was the use of occupying uncivilized people? Moreover, it would waste a lot of money. Kuang Yi couldn't imagine that war was also the best way to plunder money. As long as it was done well and the war was won, the dividends would be very generous. Unfortunately, the Ming people didn't know this. They only saw the wealth used to mobilize the army and didn't see the spoils after the war was won. Therefore, at this moment, Kuang Yi and Yang Qindong's ideas had undergone a serious change. Especially when Kuang Yi saw that Yang Xie wanted to make a move on the southern Ming dynasty. Under the heavy pressure, the friendship between the two of them was completely lost. This was also why Kuang Yi didn't have a good expression when he got off the ship. This time, following the observation group to Crimson City was also Kuang Ye's last effort. He wanted to talk to Yang Qindong about the southern Ming dynasty. Although it was unlikely that there would be any good results, Kuang Yi was still willing to give it a try. Sir, this Crimson City is different from our southern Ming dynasty cities. The only chili arch accompanying them, Kahong said carefully. How could the black-faced Kuang Yi not see it? However, at this moment he didn't know what to say. He could only remind him again, look more and speak less. Especially the army camp in the city. You must go in and take a look. Yes, but Kahong's face revealed a trace of difficulty. This wasn't the southern Ming dynasty. Their identities as military officials were useless. If it wasn't for Bugnam of Gojoseon's permission, trespassing into the army camp would be a capital offense. Knowing what Kahong was worried about, Kuang Yi waved his hand and said, no matter, I will talk to Bugnam of Gojoseon about this matter. I will fight for you. The moment he said that, it was clear that Kuang Yi didn't have much confidence in this matter. Speaking of which, he was the Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, the Minister of War, a lower-class rank 1 official, which was already quite impressive. However, if Yang Qindong didn't care about him, there was nothing he could do. Hearing Kuang Ye's words, Kahong and the other two didn't say anything else. Instead, they looked out of the window with curious gazes. The scenery constantly changed. The carriage entered the city and finally stopped in front of the Yangxia Hotel. Speaking of the Yangxia Hotel, it was built 3 years ago. Because the Yang family's territory and influence had expanded greatly, the Yang family Grand Hotel was built on the largest scale when it was first built. It took up a few hundred hectares of land, and many of the surrounding buildings were demolished. After 3 years it was finally completed. It was open last month. The entire hotel was 8 stories high, and there were more than 20,000 bedrooms. There were also countless restaurants and boutiques. With such a large scale, it was more than enough to accommodate the southern Ming dynasty's observation team. Thus, when everyone walked out of the carriage, the room keys were handed to them. A thick red carpet was laid out from the entrance of the hotel all the way to the hotel. As soon as they entered the hotel, the various chandeliers above their heads were reflected in everyone's eyes. At this time, although the sky wasn't dark yet, the light from the electric lights was already useful. When they saw the colorful lights flickering above the chandeliers, almost everyone in the observation team was shocked again. Not only that, when everyone entered the elevator in the lobby and was suddenly brought up, many people were so scared that their faces turned pale. Then they each took their own keys and entered the floor. After entering the room, everything in front of them opened their eyes. There was a separate luxurious bathroom, a comfortable big bed, and a wide and bright floor-to-ceiling window. There was also a kettle that could boil hot water when it was turned on, as well as instant noodles, ham sausages, canned food of various flavors, and various drinks placed in every room. It was so bright that it blinded most people's eyes. Wang Shang was a girl who was very curious about anything new. When she read the instructions in the room and learned how to use the things, she immediately boiled a kettle of water. Then she poured the instant noodles and ham sausages into it and quickly ate until she was full. Touching her full stomach, she quickly walked out of the room and went to the next room. Then she knocked on the door of each room. Soon, under her efforts, most of the instant noodles, ham sausages and other things in the rooms were wiped out. The kind of junk food that everyone was used to in the future had now become incomparably delicious in the eyes of many people. As a direct result, when it was time for dinner, everyone came out of their rooms and entered the banquet hall in batches. When they saw the dazzling array of delicacies, many of them cast resentful gazes at Wang Shang. Wang Shang also felt very wronged. How would she know that Yang Xie had prepared so much delicious food for them at night? She thought that the so-called welcome banquet would be the same as the banquets held in the palace in the past. There would only be a small amount of food at each table, and there would be so many rules that they wouldn't even be full in the end. Fortunately, Wang Shang was very young and digested food quickly. It didn't take long for her to compete with some of her younger sisters in the same industry to eat the food in the buffet. The biggest advantage of a buffet was that you could choose food at any time according to your appetite. Then you could put it on a plate and start eating. There was no need to pay attention to any rules, and there was no need to wait for the guests to call you and fall into an awkward situation. This was the favorite way of eating for young people. They had enough of the rules at home and could finally let go of themselves for once. Of course, they were very happy. On the other hand, when officials like Kuang Yi saw the food, their eyes widened and they felt that it was a waste. Some of the more observant people did a rough calculation. They were afraid that tonight's entertainment would cost a lot of money. Yu Qian and Xin Yu also brought a group of Yangxia officials to join the welcome banquet. Compared to most of the southern Ming officials who were at a loss or ate and drank to their heart's content, the Yangxia officials who were used to this kind of scene just held a cup of wine and casually chatted with others. In addition, all of the Yangxia officials were wearing gray Chinese tunic suits, which made them look quite stylish. Bugnam of Gojoseon has arrived. A loud shout sounded, and a group of black cavalry rushed in from the entrance of the banquet hall. They were all dressed in neat military uniforms. After entering the banquet hall, they guarded the main roads and stood on both sides. They didn't delay everyone's meal and could guarantee that they could control the situation and deal with any unexpected situations. After waiting for these Longwei officials to stand in their positions, Yang Chendong took Hu Yan's hand and strode into the banquet hall with Wan Xiaochen, Leng Song, and other officers in military uniforms. Today Yang Chendong was wearing a marshal's military uniform, which was rare, and it made him look particularly energetic. When the shiny black leather shoes landed on the red carpet, everyone's attention was instantly drawn to them. Chapter 1633. Wow. So handsome. Yang Chendong's appearance was seen by many women in the observation group, especially girls like Wang Shang. They couldn't help but cry out in surprise. There were also countless girls whose eyes were already filled with little stars. Yang Chendong was only 37 years old. This was the age when men were at their most charming. Coupled with the military uniform, he looked even more energetic. In particular, his innate temperament gave people a sense of vigor and vigor. This was something that many southern Ming officials did not have. As soon as Yang Chendong appeared, he immediately attracted the attention of everyone present. This was especially true for the older ladies and their wives, who all looked at him with watery eyes. Little girls like Wang Shang, who looked like an uncle, were even more attractive. At this moment, even Kuang Yi, who wanted to argue with Yang Chendong, couldn't help but sigh. At least in terms of appearance, Yang Chendong was impeccable. Holding Hu Yan's hand, Yang Chendong entered with a smile. He looked around as if he didn't have a focal point, but he also seemed to see everyone in his eyes, giving people a feeling of being valued. At this moment Hu Yin was also smiling like a flower. The noble temperament of a queen was undeniable. Walking together with Yang Qindong, she gave people the feeling that they were young girls. Applause quickly sounded in the banquet hall. Yu Qian, Xinyu, Luan Shaochen, Leng Song and Long Tainan, who was in charge of security, led the applause. Soon the hall was enveloped in warm applause. Influenced by this, the Southern Ming observation group also applauded, causing the atmosphere to reach its peak. Yang Qindong didn't have any intention of speaking. He had just arrived in Crimson City and didn't know much about this place. As such, it was still too early for him to say anything. It was better to let everyone see and understand him first before he spoke. At that time, the meaning would be more than 100 times greater. Yang Qindong, who didn't have any intention of speaking, held a wine glass and lightly clinked glasses with Chen Sun, Wang Zue, Xie Chong and the others. Regardless of whether they were on the same side or not, they all had smiles on their faces as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. However, this harmonious atmosphere quickly changed due to Kuang Ye's arrival. Although Kuang Ye was over 80 years old, he quickly squeezed in front of Yang Qindong because of his tall stature and the fact that he had practiced martial arts when he was young. In response to Kuang Ye's arrival, Qin Sun and the others naturally made way for him. At the same time, they couldn't help but take a step back. They had seen Kuang Ye's performance along the way, so they naturally didn't think that Kuang Ye was here to bond. The truth was no different from what everyone had guessed. As soon as Kuang Ye squeezed in, he put on a fake smile and said in a somewhat sarcastic tone, "Wunan Wang is so mighty. So it's Duke Kuang, long time no see." Seeing Kuang Ye squeeze his way in, Yang Qindong, as the host, put on an appropriate smile. Kuang Ye acted as if he didn't see Yang Qindong's goodwill. Instead he said sourly, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, to think that you've always been the best to the Han people. To think that you once told this old man that money should be spent wisely. But look at this banquet hall, the food prepared here must be expensive. With this money, wouldn't it be better to leave this food for the people? Why waste it here?" Once the word waste came out, Chen Sun, Wang Zue, and Xie Chang's expressions immediately turned ugly. What was waste? Was it a waste to let everyone eat? Was it not a waste to let the people eat? This was clearly Kuang Ye looking for trouble. At this moment, everyone's impression of him had a trace of disgust. On the other hand, Yang Qindong's expression didn't change. He understood Kuang Ye. The information sent by the intelligence department also showed that this old man wasn't very particular about his food. He didn't have extravagant expectations of delicacies as long as he was full. Therefore, it wasn't surprising that he would say something like this. However, this was his own welcome banquet after all. As the host, Yang Qindong naturally wouldn't look too good if he said something like this at such an occasion. Yang Qindong had always been the type of person who would return the favor 10 times over. How could he be polite? He gently swirled his wine cup and then raised his head, asking word by word, "Waste? Ah, Sir Kuang, you're really ignorant." The change from Duke Kuang to Sir Kuang already proved Yang Qindong's attitude. At this moment, Kuang Ye clearly didn't notice this. He only heard Yang Qindong say that he was ignorant. He immediately became furious and his voice rose 2 pitches as he asked, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, what do you have to say?" His raised voice immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the banquet hall. Originally, because of Yang Qindong's appearance, many people intentionally or unintentionally gathered here. Now that Kuang Ye had shouted, everyone's attention and curiosity were all drawn here. Kuang Ye was angry and his face was full of anger. However, Yang Qindong didn't care about this. Instead, he chuckled and said in a voice that wasn't loud, but could be heard clearly by the people around him, "Sir Kuang, haven't you heard of the ancient saying that reason doesn't depend on one's voice? Also, this prince doesn't agree with your words of waste. A person living in this world can eat better and wear better clothes through their own efforts. What's wrong with that? Do we have to eat chaff and swallow vegetables? If that's the case, then what's the meaning of life?" After being reprimanded by Yang Qindong, Kuang Ye's face became even uglier. However, he didn't lose his composure because he had already thought of the consequences of his words. Therefore, facing Yang Qindong, he didn't back down and said, "There's nothing wrong with a person's pursuit. However, the ancient people also said that if one achieves success, they will help the world. You, Bugnam of Gojoseon, boasted that you will lead the Han people to a better life. Have you done it? You're eating and drinking here, but have you thought about whether the people outside have food to eat?
Even if it's just eating chaff and swallowing vegetables, can you do it? Of course I can do it. Almost without hesitation, Yang Qindong said this sentence. Then he turned around and looked at the people attending the banquet and said, since this prince has said that he will give the people a better life, then he will naturally do it. This point, everyone can find the answer during the inspection of Qichen City. If there really are people starving to death on the streets, or as Kuang Yi said, most of the people are eating chaff and swallowing vegetables, then you can curse this prince. This prince will accept it. On the other hand, if the people really live a better life under this prince's lead and don't have to worry about food and clothing, then this prince would like to ask you, Kuang Yi, what will you do? Kuang Yi was truly stunned at this moment. He originally thought that after he criticized Yang Qindong would find all kinds of reasons to explain himself. Then he would pretend to be magnanimous and let him off. This way he would be able to show his magnanimity and suppress Yang Qindong's arrogance. This would be very beneficial for the future interactions between Nan Ming and Yang Xie. But he never expected that Yang Hodong had no intention of backing down at all. Instead he accepted his challenge. At this moment he was first shocked, then he was overjoyed. What a good Yang Qindong. Sure enough, he boasted shamelessly. He actually dared to boast like this. If that was the case, then he was asking for a beating. If that was the case, then he would not be polite anymore. Okay, if everything is as Bugnam of Gojoseon said, then this old man will apologize on the spot and turn around to leave. Kuang Yi said heroically. Very good, I hope that some people will keep their words. His gaze landed on Kuang Yi. Yang Qindong's expression was very calm, as if he had already won the bet. This was only a small interlude in the banquet, because Yang Qindong soon left. This was the first time everyone had met. He would not be of any use if he stayed. On the contrary, he would give everyone a sense of pressure and make everyone unhappy. With Yang Qindong's departure, the banquet hall became lively again. Wang Zuo also found an opportunity to come to Yu Qian's side. The two of them were old officials of the Great Ming Dynasty and had interacted before. Because they admired each other's character, their relationship was not bad. Now that there was an opportunity, of course they had to have a good chat. Wang Zuo first observed Yu Qian and found that he did not feel unhappy because of Kuang Ye's interference. Instead, he had a smile on his face and seemed to be in a good mood. He asked curiously, Yu Qian, I'm sure you saw what happened just now. Are you not worried about your king at all? Worried? Why should I be worried? Yu Qian asked in confusion. Wang Zuo was also surprised. He thought to himself, can we still have a good chat? However, he still said, Yu Qian, are you not afraid that Grand Tutor Kuang will really wander around Crimson City? Why should I be afraid? Yu Qian asked again. Then he chuckled and said, Wang Zuo, since the king dares to say this, there is naturally no problem. That's right, if Wang Zuo does not believe me, you can also look around the city. If you really find people who cannot afford to eat or wear clothes, tell me at any time. I'm also willing to apologize like the king. After saying this, Xinyu came to find Yu Qian and said that there were a few officials there who wanted to ask him some questions. Soon only Wang Zuo was left. At this moment, Wang Zuo was rooted to the spot as if he had been struck by lightning. He was still thinking about what had happened just now. He understood Yu Qian. He was definitely a man of action and was also a bit idealistic. There was no problem with this kind of person doing things, but because he was too righteous, it was easy for him to offend people. If he wanted others to admire him, it was basically impossible. This kind of person would not boast. But what did he just say? He even told him to look around the city. If this wasn't boasting, then what was? You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.